I buried my husband on a Tuesday. By Saturday, my entire world exploded at my son's first birthday party. My younger sister Lily walked in with her child, and I thought for one naive moment that she'd come to support me. Instead, she stood up in front of everyone I loved and said 5 words that stopped my heart. "Your husband fathered my son." The room went silent. Then she smiled that cold, calculated smile I'd seen glimpses of throughout our childhood and continued. "So according to his will, I'm owed $5 million from the estate. I'm just here to claim what belongs to my child." She actually waved the legal documents in my face. My mother gasped. My relatives started whispering. I could feel their judgment, their pity, their schadenfreude washing over me like poison. And you know what I did? I smiled. Not because I was in denial, not because I'd lost my mind with grief. I smiled because my late husband David had told me something 3 months before he died. Something that would turn my sister's perfect revenge plot into the biggest mistake of her life. Because here's what Lily didn't know: David had discovered her plan 2 years earlier. And the will she was waving so confidently, it wasn't protection for her. It was a trap. What happens next will show you exactly how far a desperate woman will go to destroy her own sister, and how a dead man's love can protect his family even from the grave. This is the story of how I went from the family scapegoat to the woman who finally fought back. And trust me, by the end, my sister will wish she'd never walked into that birthday party. My name is Allison Thomas. I'm 35 years old, a marketing director at a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, and until 6 days ago, I was a wife. Now I'm a widow with a 1-year-old son who will never remember his father's laugh, never know the way David used to sing off-key while making breakfast, never feel the absolute safety of being lifted onto those strong shoulders. That's what I was thinking about as I pulled into my mother's driveway 3 hours after we'd lowered my husband into the ground. The house looked exactly the same as it had my entire life. Same pale yellow siding that needed repainting. Same overgrown azaleas that Mom refused to trim because they're pretty when they bloom. Same welcome mat that said, "Bless this home," in fading letters. Everything about it screamed permanent stability tradition. Everything about it made my skin crawl. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering myself. My son Jackson was asleep in his car seat, exhausted from a day he was mercifully too young to understand. I could hear voices through the open windows. My family had descended on the house after the funeral, and apparently they'd already made themselves comfortable. I recognized my mother's laugh, high and nervous, my Aunt Carol's louder cackle, and underneath it all, Lily's voice, smooth and charming, holding court as always. The moment I walked through the door with Jackson in my arms, the energy shifted. Not in the way you'd expect when a grieving widow enters a room. No hushed respect, no rushing to help. Instead, my mother looked up from the kitchen with an expression I'd seen 1,000 times before, a mixture of concern and criticism, love and disappointment wrapped in the kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes. "Oh, Allison, sweetheart, there you are. We were wondering when you'd arrive. Put the baby down, honey, you look exhausted. When was the last time you ate? You're getting too thin. Grief isn't an excuse to neglect yourself, you know." She barely paused for breath before turning to my aunt. "Carol, doesn't she look thin? I keep telling her she needs to take care of herself, especially now that she's alone with the baby." Alone. As if David had left me by choice. As if widowhood were a personal failing. "I'm fine, Mom." I managed to get the words out while carefully laying Jackson in the portable crib I'd set up in the corner. My back ached. My feet hurt from standing in heels all day. My eyes felt like sandpaper. But I was fine because that's what I always was. Fine. Capable. Not needing help. "Well, you don't look fine." This from my Aunt Linda, who'd positioned herself on the couch like she owned it. "You should let us help you more. We're family. That's what family does." I wanted to ask where this family had been when David was dying in the hospital. Where they'd been when I was planning a funeral while simultaneously trying to keep a business running and a baby fed. But I'd learned long ago that questioning the narrative only made things worse. That's when Lily emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of cookies like she was the hostess instead of another guest. My younger sister has always known how to make an entrance. At 32, she'd perfected the art of seeming both fragile and captivating. Today, she wore a black dress that managed to be both funeral appropriate and subtly flattering. Her hair was styled in soft waves. Her makeup was perfect, just enough to enhance without appearing vain. "Allison." She set down the tray and moved toward me with arms outstretched. "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through." The hug was brief and somehow left me feeling colder than before. When she pulled back, her eyes swept over me with an assessment that felt more calculating than concerned. "You really do look exhausted. Why don't you sit down? I'll get you some tea. You remember how you always loved chamomile when we were little?" She didn't wait for an answer, just glided back toward the kitchen, and I heard my mother say, "Lily's been such a help today, Allison. Such a blessing to have her here." A blessing, yes. Lily had always been the blessing, the delicate one, the one who needed protecting. I was the sturdy one, the responsible one, the one who could handle anything life threw at her because that's what I'd been trained to do since I was old enough to understand that my job was to make room for my sister's needs. I lowered myself into a chair and let the familiar dynamics wash over me. Aunt Carol was asking Lily about her son, 2 years old now, apparently doing wonderfully in his daycare program. Uncle Frank was talking loudly about the stock market. My mother was fussing over everyone, making sure drinks were refilled, snacks were available. The house was warm enough, cool enough, comfortable enough. No one asked me about Jackson's sleep schedule, which had been a nightmare since David died. No one asked how I was managing work, or if I needed help with the mortgage, or if I'd thought about what came next. They talked around me about me, but rarely to me. It was like being a ghost at my own husband's funeral reception. I watched Lily charm my uncles with some story about her recent promotion at work. She was an administrative assistant at a law firm, and from the way she told it, you'd think she was arguing cases before the Supreme Court. Everyone laughed at the right moments, gasped with appropriate shock, murmured their approval of her success. When I'd been promoted to director last year, managing a team of 15 people and a 7-figure budget, my mother had said, "That's nice, dear. Just don't work yourself too hard. Men don't like women who are too career-focused." The thought came unbidden. This is what you'll teach Jackson if you don't break free. He'll grow up watching you diminish yourself. Swallow your hurt. Accept crumbs of respect from people who should love you unconditionally. He'll learn that family means enduring, not thriving, that silence is loyalty, that your worth is measured by how much you can tolerate. But leaving drawing boundaries, choosing myself that felt impossible, these were my people, my blood, my history. And Jackson was growing up without a father. The least I could do was give him extended family, cousins, traditions, belonging. Even if belonging meant I never quite fit. I would endure this. I would get through the next few weeks, the birthday party I was planning for Jackson next month, the holidays that would feel hollow without David. I would smile and nod and let Lily shine, let my mother fuss, let the family treat me like the dependable workhorse who needed no care of her own. Because that's what I did. That's who I'd always been. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known as I sat there in my mother's living room surrounded by family who saw me as a convenient fixture rather than a whole person, was that Lily had been preparing for this. For years she'd been waiting, watching, planning. And in just a few weeks at my son's first birthday party, she would finally make her move. I was helping my mother wash dishes when Aunt Margaret found me in the kitchen. She was my father's oldest sister, 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in the family who'd ever made me feel truly seen. She moved slowly now, leaning on her cane, but her eyes missed nothing. "Come sit with me a moment, Allison," she said quietly, gesturing toward the small breakfast nook by the window. "These old bones need a rest, and I suspect yours do too." I dried my hands and followed her, grateful for any excuse to step away from the living room where Lily was regaling everyone with yet another story. Through the doorway, I could hear my sister's laugh, bright and musical, followed by the appreciative murmurs of our relatives. The sound made my jaw tighten. Aunt Margaret settled into the chair with a soft grunt and studied me for a long moment. The afternoon light caught the silver in her hair, and I noticed how much frailer she'd become since I'd last seen her at Christmas. Time was taking its toll on all of us, I supposed. Some of us just wore it more visibly than others. "You're angry," she said finally. It wasn't a question. I opened my mouth to deny it, the automatic response I'd perfected over 35 years, but something in her expression stopped me. "I'm tired," I said instead, which was at least partially true. "You're angry and tired, which is worse." She reached across the small table and patted my hand. Her skin was papery thin, spotted with age, but her grip was firm. "I've been watching this family for 8 decades, child. I know what I see." My throat tightened. "I just buried my husband, Aunt Margaret. I think I'm entitled to feel however I feel." "Of course you are. That's not what I'm talking about." She leaned back, her gaze drifting toward the living room where the family had gathered. "I'm talking about the way they treat you, the way they've always treated you." The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to defend them, to make excuses, to explain that family was complicated and everyone meant well and I was probably just being too sensitive. But I couldn't force the words out. "Family isn't always fair, Allison," she said quietly. "But everyone has to choose their own boundaries. You understand what I'm telling you?" I stared at her. Choose boundaries. As if it were that simple. As if I hadn't spent my entire life being told that boundaries were selfish, that family meant sacrifice, that love required endless tolerance. I was the oldest daughter in my generation. Aunt Margaret continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. "Your grandmother got the pretty dresses, the piano lessons, the debut party. I got hand-me-downs and extra chores and expectations that I'd simply manage because I was the capable one." She smiled, but it was sad. Sound familiar? It did. God help me, it did. I spent 40 years taking care of everyone else before I finally asked myself what I wanted. By then, I'd missed my chance at so many things. A career I dreamed about. A man who wanted to marry me but couldn't compete with my family obligations. Adventures I'd planned but never took because someone always needed something. Her eyes focused on me again. "I don't want that for you, sweetheart. I've watched you shrink yourself smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the space they've allotted you. But you're too big for that space. You always have been." The tears came before I could stop them. They weren't the clean, dignified tears from the funeral. These were hot and angry and desperate, spilling down my cheeks while I tried to remain silent so no one in the other room would hear. Aunt Margaret squeezed my hand tighter. "Think about it, child. That's all I'm asking. Just think about whether the peace you're keeping is worth the price you're paying." She left me there in the breakfast nook, and I sat alone while her words echoed in my head. Choose your own boundaries. Had I ever chosen anything when it came to this family? Or had I just accepted the role assigned to me before I was old enough to know I could refuse? The memories came flooding back, sharp and clear, in a way they'd never been before. I'd always pushed them down, reframed them, convinced myself they weren't as bad as they felt. But now, sitting in my mother's kitchen with my husband 6 feet underground and my son sleeping in the next room, I couldn't look away anymore. My college fund. I'd saved money from part-time jobs throughout high school, and my parents had promised to match it. I'd planned to study marketing at Northwestern, had already been accepted. Then, Lily, barely 15, decided she needed braces and extensive dental work that insurance wouldn't cover. "It's more urgent," my mother had said. "You're smart, Allison. You'll figure it out. But Lily needs this now." I'd ended up at community college for 2 years before transferring to a state school, working 30 hours a week to pay for it myself. Lily got perfect teeth and never said thank you. My wedding. David and I had wanted something small and meaningful, maybe a destination ceremony with close friends. My mother had been horrified. "What will people think? We can't afford anything fancy, Allison, you know that." So we'd had a backyard wedding with a grocery store cake and folding chairs. It was fine. It was beautiful in its simplicity. I'd convinced myself I didn't care about the lack of flowers, or the DJ we couldn't afford, or the fact that my mother spent the entire reception apologizing to relatives for the modest celebration. But 3 years earlier, Lily's Sweet 16 had been held at a rented venue with a live band, professional photography, and a dress that cost more than my wedding gown. She only turned 16 once, my mother had explained, and she's been through so much. What had Lily been through? I'd never been able to identify the specific trauma that required such endless accommodation. My pregnancy announcement. I'd been so excited, had planned to tell the family over Sunday dinner. I'd barely gotten the words out before Lily squealed that she'd just started dating someone new, someone really special, and could we please help her move into a new apartment that weekend because this guy lived nearby and she wanted to be closer to him. The conversation pivoted immediately. My mother started planning the move. Aunts offered furniture. By dessert, my pregnancy had been reduced to a footnote. Oh, and congratulations, Allison, how nice for you. Every birthday where Lily's gifts outnumbered mine. Every family dinner where her accomplishments were celebrated while mine were mentioned in passing. Every crisis where I was expected to drop everything to help, while my own emergencies were met with, "I'm sure you can handle it." 35 years of being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need support because she was too busy providing it to everyone else. Aunt Margaret was right. I had been systematically diminished. But worse, I had allowed it. I had called it love. I had called it family. I had called it keeping the peace. But peace for whom? Not for me. I had no peace. I had exhaustion and resentment and a growing certainty that if I didn't change something, I would spend the rest of my life being the family's emotional support system while receiving nothing in return. The question crystallized in my mind with uncomfortable clarity. At what point does family loyalty become self-betrayal? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time in my life, I was asking the question. And that felt like something. A beginning, maybe. A crack in the foundation of acceptance I'd built my entire identity upon. I stood up from the breakfast nook, wiped my eyes, and walked back into the living room where my family was still gathered. They barely noticed my return. Lily was showing photos on her phone, her son at the park, her son at daycare, her son doing something adorable that made everyone coo. I sat down in the corner chair and watched them. Really watched them and saw the pattern with new eyes. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing on the edge of something, a choice that would define the rest of my life. Because in just a few weeks at my son's first birthday party, my final boundary wouldn't just be crossed. It would be obliterated. 3 weeks later, I stood in a small community room at the local rec center, hanging streamers that Jackson would probably try to eat and arranging balloon clusters that seemed cheerful without being excessive. The party was tomorrow, and for the first time in my life, I'd planned something exactly the way I wanted it. Small, intimate. Just close friends and their children. No extended family drama. No performing for relatives who would judge every detail. This was for Jackson for his first birthday, for celebrating that he'd made it through his first year of life, even though his father hadn't. I wanted it to be pure and simple and full of love, the kind of day David would have wanted for his son. I'd rented this space specifically because it wasn't my mother's house. Wasn't anyone's territory, but neutral ground where I could control the guest list and the atmosphere. I'd ordered a small cake from a local bakery, nothing fancy, just vanilla with blue frosting and a little fondant No. 1 on top. I'd bought decorations from Target, picked up sandwich platters from the grocery store, and invited exactly 12 people, 3 couples. We were close with their kids, and my friend Rachel from work, who'd been my rock since David died. It felt good. It felt like mine. For once, I wasn't trying to meet anyone's expectations or accommodate anyone's needs but my own and Jackson's. Aunt Margaret's words had been working on me like yeast in bread dough, slowly expanding something in my chest that felt dangerous and liberating at the same time. Choose your own boundaries. This party was my first small attempt. I was adjusting a banner when my phone buzzed. A text from Lily. So excited for tomorrow, what time should I arrive? My stomach dropped. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. I hadn't invited Lily. I hadn't invited anyone in my immediate family, actually, because I knew from experience that inviting one meant inviting all, and inviting all meant the day would become about them rather than Jackson. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. How did she even know about the party? I'd mentioned it to my mother in passing, asking her not to spread it around because I wanted to keep it small. Of course, she'd told Lily. My mother had never been able to keep anything from her precious youngest daughter. I typed carefully. Hi, Lily. I'm keeping this really small, just a few close friends. Maybe we can celebrate with family another time. The response came back almost immediately. Don't be silly. I wouldn't miss my nephew's special day for anything. I'll be there by 2. Do you need me to bring anything? There it was. Not a request. Not even really a response to what I'd said. Just a statement of fact, as if my attempt to set a boundary had been so ridiculous it didn't warrant acknowledgement. She was coming, period, and I could either accept it gracefully or be the bad guy who excluded her own sister from her nephew's birthday. I tried once more. I really appreciate it, but I think it might be too crowded. The space is pretty small. Allison, stop worrying so much, it'll be fine. See you tomorrow. And that was that. I stood there in the community room, surrounded by the streamers and balloons I'd so carefully arranged, and felt something in my chest constrict. This was supposed to be mine. This one thing. This one day. But Lily had inserted herself into it with the same casual entitlement she brought to everything, and I'd been powerless to stop her. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. My mother. Lily told me about the party. Why didn't you invite us? I would have helped you plan. Well, I'll bring some dishes tomorrow. What time should your father and I arrive? Aunt Carol. I hear there's a birthday party. Lily mentioned it. We'll be there. Should I bring my famous potato salad? Uncle Frank. Looking forward to tomorrow. Lily says it's at the rec center on 5th Street. Each call made it clearer that this was no longer my intimate gathering. It had been hijacked, transformed into exactly the kind of family event I'd been trying to avoid. And at the center of it all was Lily, who'd somehow made herself the hub of information about a party she hadn't even been invited to. The final straw came when my mother called back an hour later. Sweetheart, I was thinking about the seating arrangement. You should make sure Lily has a good spot near the front. You know how she loves taking photos, and she'll want to capture all of Jackson's special moments. Maybe put her right next to you when you do the cake. It'll make for better pictures. I stood there holding the phone, listening to my mother plan my son's party around my sister's preferences, and felt something crack inside me. Not break entirely, but definitely fracture. Here I was, the mother, the one who'd carried Jackson for 9 months, who'd given birth to him, who'd raised him alone for the past 6 months since David died, who'd planned this entire celebration, and somehow my role was being reduced to making sure Lily had a good view. Mom, I need to go, I said, cutting her off mid-sentence about whether we should do a special table for gift opening. Oh, of course, dear. You're probably busy with preparations. Just text me if you need anything. And don't forget about Lily's seating. I hung up and sat down in one of the folding chairs I'd set up earlier. The room suddenly felt different. What had been a cheerful space full of promise now felt like a trap I'd set for myself. I could cancel. I could move the party somewhere else, change the time, start over. But that would cause a massive family incident. There would be hurt feelings and angry phone calls and weeks of my mother's disappointed silences. So I did what I'd always done. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself that Jackson wouldn't remember any of this anyway, that he'd be happy just to have cake and attention, that it didn't matter if my vision for his day had been compromised. I told myself I was being petty and selfish for caring so much about something so small. I told myself that family was family, and you had to make accommodations, and being gracious meant letting go of control. I told myself all these lies because the alternative was admitting that I'd lost before I'd even begun, that my first attempt at setting boundaries had failed spectacularly, that I was still exactly who I'd always been, the accommodating oldest daughter who couldn't say no. Tomorrow would be fine. Tomorrow would be about Jackson. I would smile and be gracious and let Lily have her photos and her moment in the spotlight, because that's what kept the peace. That's what good people did. What I didn't know, couldn't have known, as I locked up the community room and drove home through the darkening streets, was that Lily wasn't coming to take photos. She wasn't coming to celebrate her nephew's milestone. She was coming to detonate a bomb that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and myself. The party was actually going well. Jackson was in his high chair smeared with frosting from the cupcake he'd demolished, giggling at the other children running around the room. My friends had been wonderful, bringing thoughtful gifts and genuine warmth. Even with the unexpected invasion of family members, the afternoon had maintained a joyful energy. I'd managed to push down my resentment about the guest list expansion and focus on what mattered. My son was happy, healthy, and surrounded by people who loved him. I was carrying the birthday cake to the table, a single candle flickering on top, when Lily stood up. Something about the way she rose from her chair made the hair on my neck stand up. It was too deliberate, too theatrical. She positioned herself near the center of the room where everyone could see her, and the conversations around us began to die down as people noticed her standing there with an odd expression on her face. Not quite a smile, but something close, expectant, triumphant. "Before we do the cake," she said, her voice cutting through the remaining chatter with surprising clarity, "I need to say something I should have said a long time ago." I set the cake down slowly, my hands suddenly unsteady. My friend Rachel caught my eye from across the room, her expression puzzled. My mother looked delighted, probably assuming Lily was about to make some touching speech about family or Jackson or what a wonderful mother I was. She'd always loved when Lily held court. "My son," Lily continued, and her voice was so calm it was almost eerie, "is David's biological child. Your husband Allison fathered my boy 2 years ago. I thought you should know. I thought everyone should know." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. For a moment nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The room had transformed into a photograph, everyone frozen in whatever position they'd been in when those words landed. I could see it all with crystal clarity. My mother's hand halfway to her mouth. My Aunt Carol's eyes going wide. Rachel's face draining of color, even the children pausing in their play as they sensed something wrong in the adult world. Then the moment broke, and the chaos began. Not loud chaos, but the worst kind. The whispered kind. The kind where everyone suddenly has something urgent to say to the person next to them while their eyes dart toward me to gauge my reaction. But Lily wasn't done. She reached into her purse with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and pulled out a document. Multiple pages neatly folded, official-looking even from where I stood. She held it up like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "This is David's will," she said, and her voice carried that same unsettling calm. "It clearly states that any biological children of his are entitled to a share of his estate. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm simply here to claim what belongs to my son. $5 million. That's all I'm asking for. What's fair? What's legally owed?" The document looked real. Even from several feet away I could see signatures, notary stamps, the kind of official seals that meant something had been properly executed. She'd prepared this. She'd had lawyers involved. This wasn't a spontaneous accusation born of grief or desperation. This was calculated, planned, executed with precision at the exact moment when it would cause maximum damage. My mother found her voice first. "Lily, sweetheart, surely you don't mean to do this here at the baby's party." But even as she said it, I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Not denial, not outrage on my behalf, just calculations about how this would affect the family, what people would think, how to manage the situation. Lily turned to her with something that almost looked like pity. "When else would I do it, Mom? She's been avoiding me. Avoiding reality. Someone has to take responsibility for this child's future. I didn't want to make a scene, but Allison's left me no choice. That was Rich. I'd been avoiding her. We lived in the same city and saw each other at family functions. I hadn't been avoiding anyone, but already the narrative was forming and I could see it taking root in the faces around me. Poor Lily forced into this terrible position. Poor Lily having to make such a difficult revelation. Poor Lily just trying to do right by her child. And me, I could see what they were thinking. The wife who never noticed. The woman so focused on her career she'd missed her husband's affair. The naive fool who'd believed in a marriage that was apparently a lie. Some of the faces showed sympathy, but others showed something worse. A kind of satisfaction. The way people look when someone else's tragedy confirms their own cynical worldview. See, nobody's marriage is perfect. See, everyone has secrets. See? Even the successful ones fall apart. I should have been crying. I should have been screaming. I should have been doing something that matched the magnitude of what had just been said. My husband dead for 6 months, accused of fathering my sister's child. My marriage, the one good thing I'd thought I had revealed as a lie in front of everyone I knew. My sister claiming $5 million as if it were a casual business transaction. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slight upturn at the corners of my mouth. The kind of smile I'd perfected over 35 years of enduring family gatherings where I was dismissed, overlooked, and taken for granted. The kind of smile that said, "I'm fine," when I wasn't fine at all. The kind of smile that was armor protection, a way to maintain composure when everything inside me was screaming. But this time the smile meant something different, because underneath the shock, underneath the humiliation, underneath the rage that was building in my chest like a thunderstorm, there was something else. Knowledge. 3 months before David died, he'd sat me down in our bedroom late one night and said, "If anything ever happens to me, and Lily tries anything, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" At the time, I'd thought he was being paranoid. Now, standing in this community room with my son covered in frosting and my sister holding what she thought was her winning hand, I understood. David had known. He'd known what Lily was planning. And if he'd known, that meant he'd prepared. That meant the will she was waving around with such confidence wasn't quite what she thought it was. That meant this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I saw confusion flicker across Lily's face. She'd expected tears break down, maybe even violence. She'd expected me to crumble under the weight of this public humiliation. Instead, I was smiling at her like we shared a private joke. And in a way, we did. She just didn't know it yet. "Well," I said quietly, and my voice was steadier than I'd expected, "this is certainly a memorable first birthday party." Lily's confident expression faltered for just a moment. She didn't understand why I wasn't reacting the way she'd scripted in her head. She didn't understand why I seemed almost amused, and that uncertainty, brief as it was, told me everything I needed to know. She'd prepared for a fight, but she'd prepared for the wrong kind of fight. She thought she was facing the same Allison who'd spent a lifetime backing down, giving in, keeping the peace at any cost. She didn't know that something had shifted in me these past few weeks. She didn't know about Aunt Margaret's words, about the boundaries I was learning to draw, about the woman I was becoming in the aftermath of grief. Most importantly, she didn't know that my husband had left me the greatest gift possible, a way to fight back. The party ended in a stunned silence, punctuated by awkward goodbyes. My friends left quickly, murmuring sympathies that felt more like condolences at a second funeral. Rachel hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't make any decisions tonight," before gathering her daughter and disappearing into the parking lot. The family lingered, of course, clustering around Lily like she was the wounded party in need of comfort. I cleaned up alone, throwing paper plates into trash bags, while Jackson, oblivious to the wreckage of his birthday celebration, played with a new toy truck on the floor. My phone started ringing before I even got home. My mother, naturally. I let it go to voicemail. Then Aunt Carol, Aunt Linda, my mother again. By the time I'd gotten Jackson bathed and into bed, I had 17 missed calls and a dozen text messages, all variations on the same theme. "We need to talk about this. How could David do this, poor Lily? What are you going to do?" I waited until Jackson was asleep, his small chest rising and falling with the deep breathing of childhood innocence, before I finally listened to the voicemails. My mother's voice came through my phone speaker tight with that particular blend of concern and accusation she'd perfected over the years. "Allison, sweetheart, you need to call me back. We need to discuss how to handle this situation. I know you're upset, but we have to think about the family's reputation. And Lily's child deserves what's legally his. You've always been the reasonable one. Don't let pride get in the way of doing what's right." Doing what's right. As if surrendering $5 million to my sister based on her unsupported accusation was the obviously correct moral choice. As if my dead husband's supposed infidelity was now my problem to solve by writing a check. The next message was from Aunt Carol, slightly more sympathetic, but equally focused on resolution. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. What a terrible shock. But you know these things happen. Men stray. It doesn't mean David didn't love you. Maybe it's better to just settle this quietly before it gets ugly. Think about Jackson. Do you really want him growing up hearing about his father's affair? Ugly. It was already ugly. But apparently my job was to prevent it from getting uglier by capitulating immediately. I called my mother back because I knew she'd keep calling until I did. She answered on the first ring. "Allison, finally. Are you okay?" "No, Mom, I'm not okay. My sister just accused my dead husband of fathering her child and demanded $5 million at my son's birthday party. How would I be okay?" There was a pause, and I could hear her formulating her response, choosing her words carefully. "I know it's shocking, sweetheart, but Lily wouldn't lie about something like this. She has documents, legal documents. Maybe there were problems in your marriage you didn't see." And there it was. Not, "Are you sure this is true?" Not, "How can we verify this?" But the immediate assumption that Lily was telling the truth, and I was the blind fool who'd missed what was happening in my own marriage. What problems? Mom, David, and I were happy. We were planning for the future. He died suddenly. There were no problems. "Well, dear, you were always so focused on your career, working late, traveling for conferences. Men have needs, you know. I'm not saying it's your fault, but maybe if you'd been more attentive, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere." The words hit like a physical blow. My mother, who'd raised me to be independent and successful, was now using that success as evidence of my failure as a wife. Because if my husband had cheated, it must have been because I wasn't woman enough, wife enough, home enough. I hung up, just pressed the red button and set the phone down, my hands shaking. Then I walked to my bedroom, David's bedroom, our bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for 8 years. The bed where he'd died wasn't a bed at all, but the crumpled interior of his car after a delivery truck ran a red light. Random, meaningless. No time for goodbyes or explanations or clearing up potential misunderstandings about secret children. Had I missed something? I forced myself to examine the question honestly, to strip away my defensive anger and really look at our marriage. David had been attentive, loving, present. He'd taken paternity leave when Jackson was born, had been the one getting up for middle-of-the-night feedings because I was recovering from a difficult delivery. He'd been excited about our future, talking about maybe having another child in a few years, planning a family vacation to Disney World once Jackson was old enough to enjoy it. But memory is a liar when you're looking for deception. Suddenly, every late night at the office became suspicious. Every business trip potentially held a rendezvous with my sister. Our last conversation, so mundane it was almost meaningless, took on sinister weight. He'd called me from his car, said he was stopping at the grocery store. Did we need milk? Just milk. That's what we'd talked about minutes before a truck ended his life. Had there been something in his voice? Some guilt I'd been too distracted to hear. I pulled out my laptop and opened the photo albums I'd been too heartbroken to look at since his death. David smiling at our wedding. David holding newborn Jackson. David at the beach last summer, sun-kissed and laughing. I studied each photo like an investigator looking for signs of a man leading a double life. I found nothing but the face I'd loved, the eyes that had looked at me with what I'd believed was complete devotion. But belief wasn't proof. And absence of evidence wasn't evidence of absence. I was spiraling, I knew that. Grief and accusation were a toxic combination, poisoning every good memory with doubt. This was what Lily wanted, I realized. This interior destruction, this self-torture. Whether or not her claim was true, she'd already succeeded in making me question everything. Then I remembered something. I grabbed my phone and opened our shared calendar app, the one David and I had used to coordinate our schedules. I scrolled back 2 years to the time period Lily claimed the affair had occurred. She'd been vague about dates, but she'd mentioned those months when David was traveling so much for work. I pulled up David's calendar entries. March through June 2 years ago. There had been business trips, yes, a conference in Chicago, a client meeting in Portland, 3 days in San Francisco for a product launch. But next to each trip were my own calendar entries, and I saw something that made my breath catch. The Chicago conference. I'd gone with him. We'd made a romantic weekend of it, extended his business trip into a mini vacation. I had photos on my phone receipts and my email memories of deep dish pizza and walking along Lake Michigan. The Portland meeting. He'd driven, not flown. I remembered because he'd FaceTimed me from the car, shown me the scenery along the Columbia River Gorge. The San Francisco trip. He'd been back every night taking red-eye flights because he'd missed Jackson's bedtime routine. The timeline Lily was suggesting didn't just have gaps. It was impossible. Unless David had learned to be in 2 places at once, he couldn't have been conducting the months-long affair she was claiming. And the will. I pulled up the document she'd so triumphantly displayed using the photo someone had taken at the party that was now circulating through family text chains. The signature date was clearly visible, April 15th, 2 years ago, the week of the Chicago trip, the trip where I'd been with him the entire time. The inconsistencies piled up like evidence at a crime scene. Small details that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern. Lily's story had holes. The will's timing was suspicious. The whole narrative didn't quite fit together when examined closely. My family hadn't noticed because they weren't looking. They'd accepted Lily's version immediately, without question, without verification. But I was looking now, and what I saw didn't add up. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my bedroom thinking. David's last words to me 3 months before his death echoed in my mind. If anything ever happens to me and Lily tries anything, I need you to trust me. At the time, I'd thought he was being paranoid. Now I wondered if he'd known exactly what was coming. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. We need to settle this soon. Lily's lawyer is getting involved. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because something was forming in my mind, a strategy that required patience and silence. Let them think I was in shock. Let them think I was processing, grieving, drowning in doubt. Let Lily believe her trap had worked. But I wouldn't give her an answer. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until I understood exactly what game we were playing and what David had left me to fight with. My silence would be strategic now, not defeat. For the first time since that devastating announcement at the party, I felt something other than shock. I felt the cold, clear beginning of a plan. I spent 2 days saying nothing. 2 days of ignored calls from my mother, deflected questions from relatives, and careful neutrality when anyone brought up what they were now calling the situation. Let them interpret my silence however they wanted. Meanwhile, I did something I should have done the moment Lily waved that will around. I found someone who actually understood what they were looking at. David had used an estate attorney named Michael Chen for our wills and trusts. I'd met him exactly once at the signing of our documents 3 years ago and barely remembered him beyond a vague impression of competence and a firm handshake. David had handled most of the legal details, saying he wanted me to focus on Jackson and work while he took care of the boring paperwork. At the time, I'd been grateful. Now I wondered if there had been more to that division of labor than simple consideration. I found Mr. Chen's number in David's old contacts and called from my car parked in my office garage during lunch. I didn't want to make this call from home where Jackson might interrupt, or from my desk where coworkers might overhear. This conversation needed privacy and my full attention. He answered on the third ring, his voice exactly as I remembered, measured, professional, but with an undertone of warmth. Michael Chen. Mr. Chen, this is Allison Thomas, David Thomas's wife, widow. The words still caught in my throat. I don't know if you remember me. Mrs. Thomas, of course I remember you. I was very sorry to hear about David. He was a good man and a thorough client. How can I help you? The relief of speaking to someone who didn't immediately launch into assumptions or emotional manipulation was so profound I almost cried. Instead, I took a breath and explained the situation as clinically as I could. My sister's claim, the will she'd produced, the $5 million demand, the family pressure to settle immediately. I kept my voice steady, presenting facts rather than feelings, though my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel with my free hand. When I finished, there was a pause. Not the awkward, judgmental silence I'd gotten from my family, but the thoughtful quiet of someone actually processing information. Then Mr. Chen said, I'd like you to come to my office this afternoon if possible. Bring any documentation your sister provided. Don't tell anyone you're meeting with me. 3 hours later, I sat across from him in an office that smelled like leather and old books. Mr. Chen was in his early 60s, I guessed, with silver hair and the kind of face that inspired confidence. He'd asked his assistant to hold all calls and had poured me a cup of tea I wasn't drinking. Between us, on his massive desk, lay printouts of the will Lily had displayed, which I'd managed to obtain through my Aunt Carol, who'd gotten photos from the party. Mr. Chen had been reading for 15 minutes, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, his expression growing more focused with each page. Finally, he looked up, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't pity or concern. It was something closer to professional interest. The will is authentic, he said, and my heart sank. I recognized David's signature. I witnessed it myself actually 2 years ago. The notarization is legitimate. The legal language is sound. Your sister isn't presenting a forgery. So she's telling the truth. It wasn't a question. I felt something in me deflate the small hope I'd been nursing that this was all some elaborate fraud. I said the will is authentic. I didn't say your sister is telling the whole truth. He tapped his pen on one particular paragraph dense with legal terminology. Did you read the supplementary clauses in Section 7? I leaned forward. There were too many people at the party. I only saw the document from a distance. My family has been circulating photos, but the image quality isn't great. He rotated the pages toward me, pointing to a section buried in the middle of the document. This clause here, it specifies that any claim of paternity for purposes of inheritance must be verified through court-ordered DNA testing conducted under strict chain of custody protocols, not just documentation. Not birth certificates or hospital records, court-ordered testing with specific procedures to prevent fraud or contamination. I read the words trying to understand their significance. So even if she has a birth certificate listing David as the father, it doesn't matter. Correct. The will requires independent verification through the legal system. And here. He flipped to another page. Section 9, subsection C. It states that any claim made in bad faith, any attempt to defraud the estate through false or misleading representations results in complete forfeiture of any potential inheritance and requires the claimant to reimburse all legal costs associated with defending against the fraudulent claim. The implications slowly crystallized in my mind. So if she's lying, she doesn't just lose, she pays. Precisely. These aren't standard clauses, Mrs. Thomas. These are very specific protections against very specific scenarios. Your husband anticipated something like this. He built safeguards into his will that most people would never think to include. Mr. Chen leaned back in his chair, studying me. Did David ever mention concerns about your family, about your sister specifically? I thought about that conversation 3 months before his death. If anything ever happens to me and Lily tries anything, I need you to trust me. I'd dismissed it as paranoia, stress from work, maybe some family drama I wasn't aware of. Now it seemed like exactly what it was, a warning. He said something once about trusting him if Lily tried anything. I didn't understand what he meant. Mr. Chen nodded slowly as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. I'm going to be frank with you, Mrs. Thomas. The fact that David included these specific clauses suggests he knew or suspected your sister might make a claim like this. He was preparing for it. The question is, what did he know and what evidence did he leave? Evidence. Clients who build this kind of defensive structure usually have supporting documentation. Insurance, if you will. Communications records, something that would prove their reasoning if challenged. Did David have a safety deposit box? A storage unit? Any place he might have kept sensitive documents? I thought about our home office, the filing cabinet I'd been too grief-stricken to sort through. David had always been meticulous about records, keeping everything organized in a way that used to mildly annoy me when I was looking for a simple receipt. Now that fastidiousness seemed like a gift. He had files, lots of files. I haven't gone through most of them since he died. Then I suggest that's where we start. In the meantime, do not respond to your sister's demands. Do not acknowledge her claim in any way. Do not let your family pressure you into a quick settlement. If she wants to pursue this legally, let her file the paperwork. We'll respond appropriately. He paused, his expression softening slightly. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're grieving and this is the last thing you need. But I need you to understand something. You're not defenseless here. Your husband saw this coming and he protected you. The words settled over me like armor. Protected. David had protected me, even knowing he might not be here to see it through. He'd built a legal fortress around his estate, and by extension around Jackson and me. The will Lily was waving around so confidently wasn't her weapon. It was ours. What do I do now? I asked. Now you say nothing. You gather information. You let her think she has the upper hand while we prepare. This isn't a sprint, Mrs. Thomas. It's a chess game. And your husband just gave you the opening move. I left his office as the sun was setting, my mind clearer than it had been since that terrible moment at the party. My family thought I was in shock, paralyzed by betrayal and grief. Lily thought she'd won, but they were all playing a game they didn't understand, following rules that didn't apply. I got in my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment thinking about David, about his carefulness, his quiet protection, his love that extended beyond death. Then Mr. Chen's final words echoed in my mind, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days, hope. Your husband was a very careful man, Mrs. Thomas. Very careful indeed. The attacks started subtly, the way poison spreads through a water supply. A week after my meeting with Michael Chen, I began hearing echoes of conversations I wasn't part of. My mother mentioned almost casually during a phone call about Jackson's doctor appointment that several relatives had been asking about David's state of mind in those final months. Had he seemed happy? Had he seemed stressed? Had there been tension in our marriage? Of course I told them everything was fine, she said, but the way she emphasized fine made it clear she'd implied the opposite. But people are wondering, Allison. They're saying that perhaps David felt neglected. You were so busy with work and men need attention. I heard similar sentiments from Aunt Carol a few days later, from my cousin Jennifer the day after that. Each conversation felt innocent in isolation, just family members expressing concern and confusion. But together they formed a pattern. Someone was planting seeds carefully, cultivating a narrative that painted me as the cold career woman who'd driven her husband into another woman's arms. That someone was Lily. I saw her handiwork in the sympathetic looks I started receiving at the grocery store from neighbors I barely knew. I saw it in the way conversations would pause when I entered a room at Jackson's daycare, then resume with forced normalcy. I felt it in the text message from a former colleague. Hey, I heard about the situation with your sister. That must be really hard. If you need to talk, I'm here. As if there were established facts about the situation that everyone now accepted as truth. The most insidious part was how Lily positioned herself throughout. She wasn't gossiping, according to my mother. She was reluctantly sharing difficult truths because the child's welfare demanded honesty. She sighed when people asked about it, presented herself as the woman caught in an impossible situation, forced to reveal painful secrets only because she had no choice. She was the martyr, sacrificing her own comfort to ensure her son received what was legally his. "I never wanted to hurt Allison," she'd told Aunt Linda, who'd immediately repeated it to me. "But my son deserves a father's legacy, even if that father is gone. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't fight for him?" A mother who wasn't lying. I wanted to scream. But I kept my silence, following Michael Chen's advice to say nothing, react to nothing, give them no ammunition. Meanwhile, the pressure intensified. My mother called daily, sometimes twice a day, each conversation a variation on the same theme. Jackson's future, my reputation, the family's good name. "People are talking, Allison. This is getting ugly. You need to settle this before it destroys you both. Think about what's best for the children." Always plural. Children. As if Lily's son had equal claim to my concern, my protection, my late husband's estate. Friends began distancing themselves. Not obviously, not with dramatic confrontations, but with the slow fade of unanswered texts and declined invitations. Rachel remained loyal, but even she seemed uncertain. "I believe you," she said over coffee one afternoon, but the qualifier that followed undermined everything. "But you have to admit it looks bad. And Lily seems so convinced. Maybe there's something you didn't know about David." Maybe. That word haunted me. Maybe my marriage had been a lie. Maybe I'd been blind. Maybe I deserved this for being too focused on my career, too independent, too confident in a love that apparently wasn't as solid as I'd believed. The messages came in steady streams, each one carefully worded to seem supportive while actually applying pressure. "I'm sure there's more to the story, but from the outside, it looks really bad. You should probably just settle this before it gets worse. Think about Jackson growing up with this hanging over him." Each message was a small cut, and together they were bleeding me dry. 2 weeks after the party, Lily texted me directly. "We need to talk. Just us. Can we meet?" I should have declined. Michael Chen had advised me not to engage, not to have any conversations that weren't documented or witnessed. But I needed to see her face to understand what was driving this. I agreed to meet at a coffee shop equidistant from both our homes, neutral territory where we'd be surrounded by enough people to prevent anything too dramatic. She arrived 10 minutes late, which I should have recognized as a power move. She looked perfect as always, her hair styled in soft waves, her outfit casual but flattering. She ordered a complicated latte while I sat at our table with plain coffee, watching her chat pleasantly with the barista, like she didn't have a care in the world. When she finally sat down across from me, her expression was carefully arranged into something meant to convey reluctant determination. "I'm glad you agreed to meet. I think we can settle this between us without lawyers getting involved. You brought a will to my son's birthday party and accused my dead husband of fathering your child in front of everyone I know," I said quietly. "Lawyers are already involved." Her mask slipped just for a moment. Something cold flashed in her eyes before she recovered. "I was hoping we could be mature about this, for the sake of both our children. What do you want, Lily? What's fair? What's legally mine? $5 million and we can all move on." "Based on a claim you haven't proven. I have the will. I have documentation. I have a child who deserves his father's legacy." Her voice rose slightly, and the people at the next table glanced over. She lowered it again, leaning forward. "Why are you fighting this? Do you really want everyone examining your marriage, your failures as a wife? Do you want Jackson to grow up hearing about how his father needed to find comfort elsewhere because his mother was too busy climbing the corporate ladder?" There it was. The narrative she'd been building now presented directly to my face. I was the failure. I was the one who'd driven David away. I was the villain in her carefully constructed story. "This isn't about the money, is it?" I asked, studying her face. "Of course it's about the money. My son deserves... No, this is about something else, something older. I watched her expression carefully. What is this really about, Lily? And then it came pouring out venom I hadn't expected, hatred that had apparently been simmering for decades. You want to know what this is about? It's about you having everything while I had nothing. It's about you being the golden child, the successful one, the one everyone was proud of. It's about you getting the college fund, the support, the opportunities, while I had to scrape by on whatever scraps were left. Her voice was shaking now, her perfect composure cracking. You got the perfect husband, the perfect career, the perfect life, and what did I get? I got to watch you succeed while I struggled. I got to hear Mom brag about your promotion while she made excuses for why I was still in the same dead-end job. I got to see you have it all while I had nothing. She leaned back, breathing hard. For once, just once, I'm taking something that should have been mine. You've had enough. More than enough. And I'm done watching you win while I lose. The coffee shop suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear the espresso machine hissing, could hear the low murmur of other conversations, could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't about David. This wasn't about inheritance or justice or a child's welfare. This was about 30 years of resentment, of perceived slights, of watching me live a life she thought should have been hers. Lily, I said carefully, I never took anything from you. You took everything, she hissed. Just by existing, just by being you. And now I'm taking something back. She stood up, grabbed her untouched latte, and walked out, leaving me sitting there with the terrible understanding that I wasn't fighting over money or truth or justice. I was fighting something much darker, much more personal, much more dangerous than I'd realized. This was hatred, pure, concentrated, decades-old hatred that had finally found an outlet. And my sister wouldn't stop until she'd destroyed everything I had left. I drove home from that coffee shop meeting with Lily's words echoing in my head. You took everything just by existing. The hatred in her voice had been so raw, so absolute that it frightened me more than any legal threat could. This wasn't a rational opponent I could negotiate with or reason with. This was someone who wanted to see me destroyed, who'd been waiting years for the opportunity, who would use my own grief as a weapon against me. When I got home, Jackson was already asleep, watched by the neighbor who'd been helping with childcare. I thanked her, locked the door, and stood in the quiet house that still smelled faintly of David's cologne, even though I'd long ago packed away his clothes. The house felt different now, like it was holding secrets I hadn't been looking for. Michael Chen had suggested I go through David's files. I'd been putting it off, telling myself I was too busy, too grief-stricken, too overwhelmed. But really, I'd been afraid. Afraid of what I might find. Afraid that sorting through his papers would make his death feel more permanent. Afraid that I'd discover evidence my marriage had been a lie. Now, standing in our home office, I realized my fear had been misdirected. I should have been afraid of not looking. I started with the filing cabinet, the one David had meticulously organized with color-coded folders and neat labels. Insurance documents, tax returns, investment statements. All the mundane architecture of a life lived responsibly. But there in the back of the bottom drawer was a folder simply labeled Personal Legal in David's precise handwriting. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Correspondence with Michael Chen dating back 2 years, far more extensive than the simple will signing I remembered. Emails discussing contingency planning and asset protection strategies. A letter from a private investigator I'd never heard of, dated 18 months ago, detailing surveillance that made my blood run cold. The investigator had been following Lily, documenting her movements, her relationships, her financial situation. The report noted that she'd been consulting with estate attorneys, researching paternity laws, and making inquiries about David's assets through mutual acquaintances who didn't realize they were being pumped for information. The investigator's conclusion was blunt. Subject appears to be planning legal action against client's estate. Recommend defensive measures. I found David's calendar from that same period, and the entries jumped out at me with new significance. March 28th. Attorney consultation re-estate protection. April 3rd. PI briefing. L situation escalating. April 10th. Financial review. Need contingency plan. April 15th. Will signing. Protect A at all costs. April 15th. The date on the will. Lily had waved at the party, the same will she thought was her weapon. David had known. He'd known exactly what Lily was planning, and he'd spent months preparing for it. Every clause in that will, every legal protection Michael Chen had pointed out, had been deliberately constructed to counter a threat David saw coming from my own sister. He'd built a fortress around his estate, around Jackson, around me, and I'd been completely unaware. Why hadn't he told me? I stared at the documents spread across his desk, trying to understand. The dates told part of the story. April through June. 2 years ago, I'd been 7 months pregnant, dealing with gestational diabetes and bed rest, terrified something would go wrong. David had been so protective during that time, insisting I not stress about anything, taking over all the household management, even handling my work emails when I was too exhausted to keep up. He'd been protecting me then, too, shielding me from the knowledge that my own sister was plotting against us. Had he thought he had time? Had he planned to tell me after Jackson was born, after I'd recovered, after the threat was neutralized? Or had he believed that I needed to face this myself to discover my own strength without him holding my hand through it? My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Thomas, this is Robert Harrison. I was a friend of David's from law school. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. The name was vaguely familiar. David had mentioned a Robert a few times, someone he'd stayed in touch with sporadically. No, it's fine. What can I do for you? I heard about the situation with your sister. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry you're going through this. He paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. I'm a criminal defense attorney in Portland, and about 2 years ago David called me with some theoretical questions. At the time, I thought he was just curious about a case or helping someone else, but after hearing what's happening now, I realized he was asking about himself. My hand tightened on the phone. What kind of questions? How to protect assets from false claims? What kind of evidence would hold up in court if someone made fraudulent paternity claims? The legal definition of estate fraud, and what penalties applied. He was very specific, very thorough, like he was building a case rather than just curious. Robert's voice was troubled. He mentioned your sister by name, Mrs. Thomas. He said Lily was a threat that needed to be contained carefully, and he asked if I knew any good private investigators in the Seattle area. I looked down at the PI report on the desk in front of me. Did you give him a name? I did. James Mitchell. Former FBI, very discreet. David said he needed someone who could document activity without being detected. He hesitated again. I should have reached out sooner, but I didn't know David had passed until I saw the news about your sister's claim. I wanted you to know that David was preparing for this. Whatever your sister is saying, whatever accusations she's making, David saw it coming and he built defenses. He was protecting you. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet office, surrounded by evidence of my husband's love in its most practical form. Not flowers or jewelry or romantic gestures, but legal documents and investigator reports and carefully constructed will clauses. He'd seen the threat, measured it, and built protections that would outlast his own life. The grief I'd been carrying shifted, transforming into something else. Not betrayal, not abandonment, but a kind of partnership that extended beyond death. David had done his part, laying the groundwork, building the fortress, creating the weapons I'd need to fight. Now it was my turn to use them. I thought about Lily, so confident in her attack, so certain that her will and her story and her decades of family favoritism would carry her to victory. She thought she was the hunter, and I was the prey. She thought she'd caught me defenseless, vulnerable, drowning in grief and self-doubt. But she was wrong. She'd walked into a trap David had spent months constructing. Every piece of evidence she thought supported her claim was actually building the case against her. Every confident statement she made was documentation of her fraud. Every family member she'd convinced to pressure me was a witness to her manipulation. David had given me the tools. Michael Chen was teaching me how to use them. And Lily, in her arrogance and her certainty that she'd finally found a way to tear me down, had made herself vulnerable in ways she didn't understand. I gathered the documents, made copies of everything, and began building a timeline. Not for my family, not to convince my mother or aunts or cousins who'd already chosen sides, but for the legal fight that was coming, the one Lily had started without realizing she couldn't win. She still believed she was winning. I could see it in the way she'd walked out of that coffee shop, confident and self-satisfied. She thought my silence was defeat. My lack of response was surrender. Let her think that. Let her confidence grow. Let her make mistakes. Because I was done being the accommodating sister, the dutiful daughter, the woman who kept the peace at any cost. I was done shrinking myself to fit into spaces my family had assigned me. David had seen something in me that I'd forgotten I had strength, and he'd left me everything I needed to use it. Michael Chen filed the motion 2 weeks later. I sat in his office while he explained the strategy, his fingers steepled on the desk between us, his expression focused and professional. "The will's language is explicit," he said. "Any paternity claim for inheritance purposes must be verified through court-ordered DNA testing with strict chain of custody protocols. We're simply asking the court to enforce what David clearly specified." It sounded straightforward. It felt like solid ground after weeks of drowning in my family's pressure and Lily's character assassination. But I should have known nothing about this situation would be simple. Lily's attorney filed an opposition within 48 hours. I'd never heard of Catherine Brennan before, but a quick internet search revealed she was one of Seattle's top family law attorneys specializing in complex estate disputes. Her hourly rate was higher than my monthly mortgage payment. Where was Lily getting the money to afford representation like this? The opposition brief was a masterpiece of legal theater. It argued that court-ordered DNA testing was an invasion of privacy rights both for Lily and her son. It claimed such testing was unnecessary given the extensive documentation Lily had already provided. Attached to the brief were hospital records from a facility in Tacoma showing prenatal care spanning the appropriate 9 months. A birth certificate listing David's name. Sworn affidavits from 2 witnesses claiming they'd seen David and Lily together during the relevant time period. Even photographs that purportedly showed them at a restaurant, though the images were blurry enough that the man could have been anyone. "It's impressive," Michael admitted when we reviewed their filing. "She's prepared extensively. This isn't someone making accusations on impulse. This is planned." The hearing was scheduled for late October, 3 months after the birthday party that had detonated my life. I sat in the courtroom gallery dressed in a conservative navy suit that Rachel had helped me pick out, trying to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. Lily sat on the opposite side with her attorney, looking vulnerable and determined in equal measure. She'd worn a simple dress, minimal makeup, the kind of outfit designed to evoke sympathy. The struggling single mother fighting for her child against the wealthy widow. Judge Patricia Morrison was in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd heard every lie and manipulation the legal system had to offer. She listened to both attorneys present their arguments, occasionally interrupting to ask pointed questions that suggested she was far more interested in the will's specific language than in anyone's emotional appeals. Catherine Brennan was good. She painted Lily as a woman caught in an impossible situation, forced to reveal painful truths only because her son deserved his rightful inheritance. She emphasized the documentation, the witnesses, the clear evidence of paternity that made additional testing an unnecessary invasion. "Your Honor, my client has provided everything reasonable to establish paternity. The opposition's insistence on court-ordered testing is simply a delay tactic by someone who doesn't want to accept difficult truths about her marriage." Michael Chen stood to respond, and his voice was measured, almost academic. "Your Honor, this isn't about what anyone wants to accept. This is about what the decedent explicitly required in his will. Mr. Thomas was specific court-supervised DNA testing with chain of custody protocols, not medical records, not witness statements, not birth certificates. He specified this requirement for a reason, and the court is bound to enforce testamentary intent. Judge Morrison reviewed the will's language for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. The will is unambiguous. Whatever Mr. Thomas's reasons, he specified mandatory court-supervised DNA testing for any paternity claims related to inheritance. The court will order such testing. I should have felt relief. Victory, even. But something was wrong. I watched Lily's face, expecting shock or anger or fear. Instead, I saw something that made my stomach drop relief. Brief, quickly masked, but unmistakable. She looked like someone who'd just cleared a hurdle she'd been worried about, not someone who'd lost a crucial battle. Her attorney made the appropriate objections for the record, argued about privacy concerns and the burden on a young child, but there was something perfunctory about it. Going through motions rather than fighting with real desperation. When the judge set the testing parameters, state-certified laboratory, witnessed sample collection sealed chain of custody, Catherine Brennan nodded almost immediately. No extended arguments, no appeals, just acceptance. "We'll comply with the court's order," she said, and Lily beside her nodded, looking resigned but not devastated. We left the courtroom separately, but I caught Michael Chen's expression before he schooled it back to professional neutrality. He'd seen it too, the wrongness of Lily's reaction. "That was too easy," I said once we were back in his office, door closed, speaking freely. "She should have fought harder." "I noticed." He tapped his pen against his legal pad, a gesture I'd learned meant he was thinking through implications. "She's not acting like someone afraid of what DNA testing will reveal. She's acting like someone who knows it will support her story." "But how could it? If David didn't father her child, the DNA will prove that." "Unless it won't." He leaned back in his chair, studying the ceiling. "DNA testing proves biological relationships. But biological relationships can be complex. What if the child is related to David's family, just not as his son?" The possibility opened up in my mind like a trap door. "You think she had an affair with someone else in David's family?" I think we need to be prepared for results that support her claim of biological connection while not actually proving what she's been saying. She's too confident for this to go the way we assumed. He looked at me directly. David built protections into his will for exactly this scenario. The question is, what did he know about Lily's plans that we haven't figured out yet? Over the next 2 weeks, arrangements were made for the DNA testing. Court-appointed witnesses, sealed sample containers, a state laboratory with impeccable credentials. Everything designed to produce results that couldn't be questioned or challenged. Lily showed up to her appointment with her son, who was 2 years old now, clutching a toy truck and looking confused by all the attention. I watched from across the waiting room as technicians swabbed his cheek, sealed the sample, documented everything with bureaucratic precision. Lily held him on her lap, whispering reassurances, playing the protective mother role perfectly. But I kept watching her face, looking for cracks in the performance. And I saw it again, that flash of confidence that didn't match someone whose entire claim was about to be tested under laboratory conditions. She knew something. She was counting on something. And whatever it was, she believed it would vindicate her. The samples were sent to the laboratory. The waiting began. Michael Chen estimated we'd have results in 3 to 4 weeks. "DNA testing is precise, but it's not fast," he explained. "They have to process the samples carefully, run multiple tests, verify results. We'll know soon enough." Soon enough. The words felt ominous rather than reassuring, because Lily wasn't acting like someone worried about soon enough. She was acting like someone who'd already won, who was just waiting for everyone else to catch up to the reality she'd constructed. I thought about David's notes. L situation escalating. Need contingency plan. Protect A at all costs. He'd known something about Lily's plan that I still hadn't figured out. Something that required the specific DNA testing protocol he'd written into the will. Something that made Lily confident enough to agree to testing without real resistance. The mystery deepened with each passing day, and somewhere in that mystery was the key to understanding not just what Lily had done, but what David had known she would do. The court ordered testing. Lily agreed almost too readily, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were all playing a game where only my sister knew all the rules. I was still waiting for DNA results when Lily escalated. The lawsuit came through certified mail on a Tuesday morning, thick envelope with a law firm's return address embossed in gold. I signed for it while Jackson smashed Cheerios into his high chair tray, babbling happily, completely unaware that his aunt was officially suing his mother for $5 million of his father's estate. The filing was comprehensive, professionally brutal. Catherine Brennan had earned her substantial fees, 47 pages of legal arguments, sworn affidavits, and attached documentation. The complaint painted David as a man torn between duty and desire, Lily as the tragic other woman forced into secrecy, and me as the oblivious wife now standing between an innocent child and his rightful inheritance. It was fiction presented as fact, lies wrapped in legal language, and it became public record the moment it was filed. The media found it within days. I should have anticipated that. Estate disputes involving substantial sums of money were always newsworthy, but add in the elements of sisters, dead husband, secret child, and you had the kind of story that sold papers and generated clicks. The first article appeared in the Seattle Times, "Widow Faces Sister's Paternity Claim in Multi-million-dollar Estate Dispute." The reporter had done enough research to make it sound legitimate while slanting every detail in Lily's favor. She was described as a 32-year-old single mother seeking justice for her young son. I was the wealthy widow fighting her own family's claims. The article mentioned David's successful career, the size of the estate, and Lily's extensive documentation supporting her paternity claim. My refusal to comment was interpreted as either guilt or callousness, depending on which paragraph you read. More articles followed. Local news stations picked it up. Someone created a social media thread that went viral, complete with photos of Lily looking vulnerable, with her son contrasted against photos of me from corporate events where I looked successful and, in retrospect, cold. The narrative wrote itself, and I couldn't fight it. Michael Chen advised against public statements. Anything you say will be twisted. Let the evidence speak in court, not in the media. But silence had its own cost. Every day I said nothing, the story grew. Every day Lily gave another carefully crafted interview, I looked more guilty. She was brilliant at it, actually. She never attacked me directly, never said anything actionable. Instead, she sighed and said things like, "I never wanted this attention. I just want my son to have what his father intended." She positioned herself as reluctant, forced into the spotlight only by my unreasonable resistance. My mother called to arrange a family meeting. "We need to discuss this together," she said, her voice tight with stress. "As a family. This has gone too far." I knew what that meant, but I went anyway. Some part of me still hoped foolishly that blood would mean something. That faced with choosing between daughters, my family might at least try to see my side. They gathered at my mother's house on a Sunday afternoon, all of them. My mother, Aunt Carol, Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, my cousin Jennifer, and Daniel. My brother, who I'd barely spoken to in weeks, who'd been conspicuously absent from every conversation about the lawsuit. I'd hoped he was staying neutral. I should have known better. The meeting was an ambush disguised as mediation. They'd clearly discussed this before I arrived, had their talking points prepared. My mother started gently saying this was all very difficult for everyone, but we needed to think about what was best for the family. Aunt Carol jumped in with concerns about the media attention and how it was affecting everyone's reputation. Uncle Frank mentioned several business contacts who'd asked him about the situation, his tone suggesting I was personally responsible for his embarrassment. Then my mother delivered the prepared verdict. "We think you should settle Allison. Give Lily what she's asking for. It's what David wanted according to the will. It's what's fair for the child. And it's what's best for all of us." I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life. Not one of them met my eyes with anything resembling support. They'd already decided. I was the problem. I was the obstacle. I was the one being unreasonable by not immediately surrendering to my sister's demands. "We need to think about what's best for both children," my mother continued, and the way she said both made it clear that in her calculation, Lily's son's welfare outweighed Jackson's inheritance. "This fighting isn't good for anyone. You're hurting the family, hurting those innocent boys, hurting yourself. Just settle this before it destroys us all." I turned to Daniel, my older brother, the one person I'd thought might understand. He sat in the corner chair, studying his hands, saying nothing. His silence was worse than everyone else's accusations. It was abandonment, cowardice. The clear choice to stay safely neutral rather than risk the family's disapproval by supporting me. "Daniel," I said, and my voice cracked. "You don't have anything to say." He finally looked up, and what I saw in his face made my heart sink. Not anger, not sympathy, just resignation. He'd already chosen the path of least resistance, and that path didn't include defending me. "I think Mom's right," he said quietly. "This has gotten out of control. Maybe it's time to just end it." I left without another word. There was nothing more to say to people who'd already decided I was guilty of the crime of not surrendering fast enough. The attacks intensified after that. 2 days later, Child Protective Services called. An anonymous report had been filed claiming Jackson was living in an unstable environment due to ongoing family litigation and maternal stress. A social worker came to my house, inspected everything, interviewed me while I tried not to cry from humiliation. She was kind, but thorough, and though she ultimately found no cause for concern, the experience left me shaken. Who had called? My family, Lily herself. Work became increasingly difficult. The scandal had spread through my industry. I'd catch colleagues whispering when I entered the break room. Important clients suddenly requested different account managers. My boss called me in for a wellness check that was really an assessment of whether I was too distracted to function effectively. I wasn't fired, but the message was clear: my personal drama was affecting my professional standing. The daycare director pulled me aside one afternoon during pickup. "Mrs. Thomas, we've noticed Jackson seems more clingy lately. Some of the other parents have expressed concerns about the situation in the media. We're not asking you to leave, but perhaps you might consider whether a smaller, more private arrangement might be better for everyone." Everyone, not Jackson. Everyone else who didn't want to deal with the messiness of my life. Every aspect of my existence was under siege. My family had abandoned me. My professional reputation was crumbling. My fitness as a mother was being questioned. And through it all, Lily maintained her perfect public facade. "I never wanted any of this," she told a reporter. "I just want what's fair for my son." The DNA results were still pending. The lawsuit was moving forward, and in 3 weeks we'd have our first substantive court hearing where a judge would review the preliminary evidence and decide whether Lily's claim had enough merit to proceed to trial. Michael Chen was preparing filing motions, building our defense. But I could see the concern in his eyes even as he projected confidence. This was no longer just about David's will or paternity testing. This was about my entire life being systematically dismantled while I waited for the legal system to move at its glacial pace. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until the hearing that would determine whether this nightmare continued or finally began to end. 3 weeks to somehow hold together a life that was falling apart in my hands. 3 weeks felt like an eternity. I met with Michael Chen 3 times in the week following that disastrous family meeting. The first session was me breaking down in his office, exhausted and defeated, questioning whether I had the strength to keep fighting. The second was Michael systematically dismantling my despair with facts and strategy. The third was when we stopped playing defense and started preparing to attack. "Here's what we're not going to do," Michael said, spreading documents across his conference table. "We're not going to reveal our suspicions about the DNA results before we have them. We're not going to show our hand. We're not going to let Lily know we're building a case against her credibility." I looked up from the papers confused. But shouldn't we warn the court that something might be off? No. In legal warfare, the side that appears desperate loses. The side that projects confidence, even false confidence, forces the opponent into errors. He leaned back in his chair, watching me process this. Right now, Lily thinks she's winning. Let her keep thinking that. Let her get comfortable. Comfortable people make mistakes. It was a shift in thinking I hadn't anticipated. I'd been so focused on defending myself, proving I wasn't the neglectful wife everyone thought I was, that I hadn't considered going on the offensive. But Michael was right. Lily's confidence was her vulnerability. If we let her believe she'd already won, she might overreach, might reveal something she should have kept hidden. "What do we need?" I asked. "Context, pattern, character." He ticked them off on his fingers. "We need to show that if Lily's story doesn't hold up under scrutiny, there's a reason for that. We need to establish that deception isn't new for her. That manipulation is her pattern, not an aberration." So I became an investigator of my own sister's history. It felt distasteful, invasive, the kind of thing that violated whatever remained of family loyalty. But family loyalty, I was learning, was supposed to run both ways. Lily had destroyed mine without hesitation. I could document hers without guilt. I started with cousins and extended family members who'd always seemed slightly uncomfortable around Lily. People talked more freely when they weren't afraid of family repercussions, when they realized I was finally ready to hear what they'd always known. My cousin Jennifer, after 3 glasses of wine and a promise of confidentiality, told me about the time 5 years ago when Lily had called her sobbing about a medical emergency. Her car had broken down on the highway, she'd said, and she needed money for a tow truck and emergency room visit. Jennifer had wired her $1,500. The car had never been towed. There had been no emergency room visit. Lily had used the money for a weekend in Vegas with friends. "I never told anyone because Mom would have been furious with me for not believing Lily," Jennifer admitted. "But she never paid me back, just stopped mentioning it whenever I brought it up like it had never happened." I found similar stories from others. Uncle Frank had lent Lily money for unexpected dental work that apparently never materialized. A former roommate had covered 3 months of Lily's rent when she claimed to be between jobs, only to discover Lily had been working the entire time and spending her money on clothes and dinners out. There was a pattern spanning years, a trail of people Lily had manipulated with tears and emergencies and promises she never kept. Most damning were emails I found in my own archives, messages I'd saved without really thinking about them. 3 years ago, Lily had written to a mutual friend, "I'm so tired of watching other people have everything while I struggle. Someday, I'm going to get what I deserve from people who have more than me." At the time, I'd read it as venting about financial stress. Now it looked like a mission statement. I documented everything, created timelines, built a picture of someone whose relationship with truth was flexible at best. The family had always explained away Lily's behavior as going through a hard time, or being sensitive, or needing understanding. But collected together, viewed objectively, it looked less like someone struggling and more like someone who'd learned that manipulation worked. Then, a week before the hearing, something unexpected happened. David's former business partner called me. James Martinez had been David's closest colleague at the software company where they'd both worked before David moved to a different firm. I'd always liked James, but we'd lost touch after David's death, the way you do when the connecting person is gone. "Allison, I have something for you," he said without preamble. "David left an envelope with me 2 years ago. He made me promise to keep it in my safe deposit box and only give it to you if Lily ever made claims against his estate. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Now I understand." We met at a coffee shop downtown. James looked older than I remembered, more worried. He slid a sealed manila envelope across the table, and I could see David's handwriting on the front, "To be opened only if Lily makes claims against my estate. Give to Allison." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were copies of communications between David and the private investigator I'd found evidence of in his files. But these went further detailed, more revealed the extent of what David had known. The investigator had documented Lily researching paternity laws, consulting with estate attorneys about inheritance claims, even attending a seminar on protecting your child's financial future. That was really about maximizing claims against estates. The dates went back 18 months before the will was signed. There were also notes in David's handwriting. Lily contacted my brother Marcus about coming to visit. Very unusual. They barely know each other. Investigating. And later, confirmed. Lily spent 3 days with Marcus last spring. He thought it was just family reconnecting. I know better. She's building her case. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. David had known everything. He'd watched Lily construct her trap, and he'd built countermeasures every step of the way. The will wasn't betrayal. It was protection disguised as vulnerability. I looked up at James, who'd been watching me read. He knew. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He knew. And he prepared for it. He told me your sister was dangerous in a way most people wouldn't recognize because she hid it so well. He said if anything happened to him, you'd need proof that this wasn't sudden, wasn't legitimate, wasn't what it appeared to be. I took the documents to Michael Chen that afternoon. He read through everything methodically, making notes, occasionally nodding. When he finished, he looked at me with something close to admiration. Your husband was remarkable. He documented everything, anticipated every move. He placed the papers carefully in a folder. And now we have what we need. He pulled out another file from his desk drawer, thicker than the one I'd brought, and slid it across to me. On the tab in his neat handwriting were 5 words that changed everything. Your husband knew everything, and he prepared for it. I opened the file in Michael Chen's office and started reading. The first document was dated 23 months ago, a contract between David and the private investigator James Mitchell. The scope of work was chillingly specific: surveillance of Lily Thomas, documentation of all contacts with estate attorneys, monitoring of financial activities, and investigation of any connections she attempted to establish with David's extended family. The contract had been renewed 3 times, each renewal note stating, "Subject continues activities consistent with estate fraud planning." The investigators' reports were thorough, almost obsessively detailed. April 12th, 2 years ago. Subject visited law office of Patterson and Associates, known for estate litigation. Stayed 90 minutes. Follow-up inquiry indicates she consulted specifically about inheritance laws related to non-marital children. May 3rd. Subject attended seminar Protecting Your Child's Financial Rights at Downtown Conference Center. Took extensive notes during session on posthumous paternity claims. But the report from June 18th was the one that made my blood run cold. The investigator had somehow obtained audio of a phone conversation between Lily and someone named Angela, who I vaguely remembered as one of her friends from her previous job. Lily's voice captured with crystal clarity. I'm telling you, if I can prove it's his kid, I'm set for life. The estate is worth millions. She'll have no choice but to pay. And honestly, after everything she's gotten, that should have been mine. It's only fair. Angela had laughed. You're really going through with this? Why not? I've done the research. I've talked to lawyers. It's all legal. And David's so careful about everything, he probably has provisions in his will for unknown children. He's the type. All I need is the right documentation and timing. After he's gone, she won't even be able to ask him to deny it. After he's gone. She'd been planning this knowing David would be dead, unable to defend himself. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. I looked up at Michael Chen, my hands shaking. She was planning this even while David was alive. Keep reading. The next section was David's personal notes, handwritten pages that had been scanned and included in the file. His handwriting so familiar it made my chest ache. Seeing those careful letters, the way he crossed his T's and looped his Y's, made him feel present in a way I hadn't experienced since his death. March 15th. Investigator confirmed Lily has consulted 3 different estate attorneys in past 2 months. She's shopping for someone who will take her case. Need to accelerate protective measures. April 3rd, A is 7 months pregnant, having complications with blood sugar. Can't burden her with this now. She needs to focus on staying healthy, keeping the baby safe. I'll handle Lily quietly. We'll never need to know how close this came to destroying us. April 20th met with Chen to revise will, adding specific DNA testing requirements and penalty clauses. If Lily proceeds, she'll hang herself with her own rope. Just need to buy enough time for A to be strong enough to fight if I'm not here. That last sentence hit me like a physical blow. If I'm not here, had David known somehow? Had he sensed his time was limited? Or was it just the caution of a man trying to protect his family from a threat he understood better than anyone? The notes continued through the next several months. David documenting Lily's movements, her consultations, her increasing focus on Marcus, David's younger brother who lived overseas. May 10th. Lily contacted Marcus about visiting him in London. Very unusual. They've met maybe 3 times in 10 years. She's building something, investigating further. June 2nd. Confirmed through Marcus, who has no idea what's happening. Lily spent 3 days with him last month. She apparently suggested they get to know each other better since we're family. Marcus thought it was sweet. I know better. She's establishing connection, creating history, building the foundation of her story. And there it was, the piece I'd been missing. Lily hadn't had an affair with David. She'd manufactured a connection with his brother, created enough interaction to produce a child with genetic links to David's family, and then planned to claim David as the father, counting on him being dead and unable to deny it. But David had known. He'd watched her set the trap and built countermeasures into his will that would spring on her when she tried to collect. I flipped to the will analysis Michael had prepared, highlighting the clauses David had insisted on including. The DNA testing requirement was more specific than I'd realized. It didn't just require testing, it required court-supervised testing with chain of custody protocols that would identify not just paternity, but the specific nature of any biological relationship. If the child was related to David's family but not as David's son, the testing would reveal it. And then there was the penalty clause buried in Section 12, subsection F. Any individual making a claim of inheritance based on misrepresented or fraudulently stated biological relationships shall forfeit all claims against the estate and shall be liable for all legal costs, investigative costs, and damages incurred by the estate in defending against such fraudulent claims. David had built a trap. He'd made the will look like it supported claims of biological children, knowing Lily would see that as her opening. But he'd filled it with requirements and penalties that would destroy her if she proceeded with a false claim. And he'd documented everything, created a paper trail, proving she'd planned this fraud, giving me the weapons I'd need to fight back. The final document in the file was a letter from David to Michael Chen, dated 3 months before his death. I recognized the time frame immediately. That was the week David had sat me down and made me promise to trust him if Lily tried anything. Michael, if you're reading this with Allison, it means my worst fears came true. Lily followed through and I wasn't there to stop her. Everything you need is in these files. The investigators' reports prove premeditation. The audio proves intent to defraud. The timeline proves she built her story deliberately, knowing I'd be unable to deny her claims. The will is designed to protect Allison and Jackson, but it requires her to be strong enough to fight. I know my wife. She's stronger than she believes, but the family has spent a lifetime teaching her to doubt that strength. She'll need someone to remind her what I always knew: she's capable of anything. Don't let her surrender to keep the peace. Don't let her sacrifice Jackson's inheritance because Lily's manipulating family sentiment. Make her see that sometimes love means fighting, not yielding. And tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be there to fight beside her, but I gave her every weapon I could. I set down the letter, tears streaming down my face. David had loved me enough to build this fortress, to anticipate my weaknesses, to try to protect me even from beyond death. And he'd trusted that I would find the strength to use what he'd given me. "There's one thing I still don't understand," Michael said, pulling me back to the present. "The DNA testing. Lily agreed to it too easily. She's not acting like someone afraid of what it will reveal. That means she has some result she's counting on, some outcome she thinks will support her story, even though we know David isn't the father. I thought about David's notes, his surveillance of Lily's visit to Marcus, the way she'd deliberately created a connection with David's brother. What if the child is Marcus's? Would that show up in DNA testing? It would show a biological relationship to David's family line. Uncle and nephew share genetic markers. Without specifically testing Marcus, the results might be ambiguous enough that Lily thinks she can maintain her story. But David's will requires specific identification of the relationship, not just confirmation of family connection. Exactly. And that's the detail that's about to unravel her entire story. 3 weeks. That's how long the DNA results took. 3 weeks of watching Lily give interviews where she expressed confidence that the truth would finally be established beyond doubt. 3 weeks of her posting photos on social media of her son, captioned with things like, "Soon everyone will know you deserve what's rightfully yours." 3 weeks of me holding my breath, clutching David's documented evidence, knowing something was coming, but not quite understanding what. The results arrived on a Thursday morning. Michael Chen called me at 7 a.m., his voice tight with controlled urgency. "Results are in. Hearing is at 2 o'clock. Be at the courthouse by 1:30. I arranged emergency childcare for Jackson and dressed in the same navy suit I'd worn to every hearing armor against whatever was coming. Rachel met me at the courthouse steps, squeezed my hand, and said, "Whatever happens, you're not alone." I wished I could believe that, but the past months had taught me that alone was exactly what I was. The courtroom filled quickly. Lily sat with Catherine Brennan wearing a pale blue dress that made her look innocent and vulnerable. She smiled slightly when she saw me, not the triumphant smirk I'd expected, but something almost serene. Confidence. Absolute confidence. It made my stomach twist. Judge Morrison entered and we all stood. The formality of it felt surreal, like we were actors in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. The judge called for the DNA results to be presented, and a geneticist from the state laboratory took the stand. Dr. Sarah Kim, mid-40s professional to the point of being cold, which I appreciated. This wasn't about emotion. This was about science. "Dr. Kim, can you explain your findings?" Judge Morrison asked. "Yes, Your Honor. We conducted comprehensive DNA analysis on samples provided by the child in question, the deceased David Thomas's biological samples on file from his autopsy, and comparison samples from Allison Thomas and her son Jackson." She adjusted her glasses and looked down at her report. The results definitively establish that the child shares genetic markers with the Thomas family lineage. My heart stopped. Around me, I heard gasps. Lily's attorney leaned forward slightly, but Dr. Kim wasn't finished. "However, the specific markers and their distribution patterns rule out a father-son relationship. The genetic connection is consistent with either an uncle-nephew relationship, a grandfather-grandson relationship, or a similar degree of familial connection. But it is definitively, conclusively, not a parent-child relationship between David Thomas and this child." The courtroom erupted. Not loudly, this wasn't television drama, but in a wave of whispers and shuffling and the unmistakable sound of a narrative collapsing. I turned to look at Lily, expecting shock, fear, the expression of someone whose carefully constructed lie had just been exposed. Instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Relief. Quick, fleeting, but unmistakable. She'd expected this. She'd known the DNA would show family connection, but not paternity, and somehow that was exactly what she wanted. Catherine Brennan stood immediately. "Your Honor, we request a recess to review these unexpected results and consult with our client." "Unexpected?" Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. "You submitted this claim, Ms. Brennan? Are you saying you weren't prepared for the DNA results you yourself insisted would support your client's position?" "Your Honor, the results are complex and require interpretation. We need time to—" Motion denied. This court ordered testing specifically to resolve the question of paternity. The question has been resolved. The child is not David Thomas's son. She turned to Michael Chen. Mr. Chen, I assume you have motions to file. Michael stood, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice, even as he kept it professionally neutral. Yes, Your Honor. We move to compel identification of the actual biological father and to dismiss the inheritance claim with prejudice. Additionally, we request enforcement of the penalty clauses in Mr. Thomas's will regarding fraudulent claims. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was watching Lily. She was whispering urgently to Catherine Brennan, but her body language wasn't panicked. It was strategic. She was adjusting, pivoting, moving to whatever the next phase of her plan was. And the fact that there was a next phase that she wasn't destroyed by this revelation meant we'd missed something crucial. Judge Morrison set a continuance for 1 week to allow both sides to prepare arguments based on the new information. We filed out of the courtroom in a strange silence. In the hallway, reporters converged, but Lily's attorney waved them off with a no comment at this time that sounded more like wait and see than defeat. I caught Michael's arm. She knew. Did you see her face? She wasn't surprised. I saw. His expression was troubled. Which means she has an explanation prepared. Something she thinks will salvage her claim even with these results. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Lily's expression, that flash of relief before she'd schooled her features into appropriate shock. She'd known the DNA wouldn't prove David was the father. She'd always known. So why had she proceeded? Why make a claim she knew could be disproven? The answer came a week later when we reconvened. Lily took the stand sworn in, facing the judge directly. Catherine Brennan stood and asked the question that would flip everything on its axis. Ms. Thomas, you've heard the DNA results. Were you surprised? And Lily, looking directly at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, said 4 words that changed everything. I knew from the beginning. The courtroom went absolutely silent. 4 words. I knew from the beginning. They hung in the air like a confession and a threat simultaneously. Catherine Brennan stood frozen for a moment, and I saw confusion flicker across her face before she recovered. Whatever Lily was about to say, her attorney hadn't been prepared for it. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression sharp with interest and growing concern. You knew what Ms. Thomas, the judge asked. Lily looked directly at me, and what I saw in her eyes was something I'd never seen before. Not the usual resentment or envy, but something colder. Satisfaction. She'd been waiting for this moment, building toward it, and now she was finally going to reveal what this had all been about. I knew David wasn't my son's biological father, she said, her voice clear and steady. I've always known. Because the father is Marcus Thomas David's younger brother. We had a brief relationship 2 years ago when I visited him in London. He doesn't know about the child. He has no idea. And honestly, it doesn't matter because he was never the point either. The courtroom erupted, not in shouts but in a chaos of whispers and movement and shock. Catherine Brennan actually took a step back from her client, her face going pale. Judge Morrison banged her gavel demanding order, but the damage was done. Lily had just admitted under oath that she'd lied about everything, that her entire claim was built on deception. But she wasn't done. Your Honor, Catherine Brennan managed, I request a recess to consult with my client. This testimony is... You'll sit down, Ms. Brennan, Judge Morrison said sharply. Your client is under oath and has chosen to make statements to this court. She'll continue or invoke her Fifth Amendment right, but she will not be coached mid-testimony. Lily smiled slightly, and I realized she wanted this. She wanted to say what came next, wanted the audience wanted me to hear it in the most public, most official setting possible. The paternity issue was never about who fathered my son, she continued, still looking at me. It was about creating a weapon. I needed a story that would be believable, that would gain family support, that would destroy you in the most complete way possible. And it worked, didn't it, Allison? For months you've been the villain, the neglectful wife, the bitter widow, the cold career woman who drove her husband away. Her voice was getting stronger, more confident, as if speaking this truth out loud was liberating. I wanted you to experience what I've experienced my entire life. Being dismissed, being pitied, being judged. I wanted you to know what it feels like when your own family turns against you, when everyone assumes the worst, when every friend distances themselves because you're just too messy, too complicated, too much. Ms. Thomas, Judge Morrison warned, you're confessing to fraud against this estate. I strongly suggest— I'm confessing to revenge, Lily interrupted, and I saw the judge's eyes widen at the sheer audacity. The $5 million, that was bait. A plausible motive to hide the real one. Money would have been nice, sure. But what I really wanted was to watch my sister lose everything the way I've lost everything. Her reputation, her family support, her confidence, her sense of safety. I wanted her to wake up every morning wondering if her marriage was a lie, if her husband had betrayed her, if she'd been too blind to see what was happening in her own home. She turned now to address the entire courtroom, her voice rising with an emotion I'd never heard from her before. Pure, undiluted hatred. You've always had everything, Allison. From the moment we were born, you were the golden child, the smart one, the successful one, the one who got opportunities while I got excuses about why there wasn't enough money, enough time, enough attention left over for me. You got the college fund, you got the pride, you got the perfect husband and the perfect career and the perfect life. Ms. Thomas, that's enough, Judge Morrison said, but Lily kept going, her words tumbling out now like she'd been holding them in for decades. I needed you to lose something, to lose everything, so you'd finally understand what it feels like to be me, to be second best, to be overlooked, to watch someone else live the life that should have been yours. The money was never the point, Your Honor. Breaking her was the point. Watching her suffer was the point. And I succeeded, didn't I? She looked at me again, triumphant. I destroyed your reputation. I turned your family against you. I made you question everything you thought you knew about your marriage. I made you hurt. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, staring at Lily with something close to horror. Catherine Brennan had her head in her hands. Michael Chen sat perfectly still beside me, but I could feel the tension radiating from him. Judge Morrison's voice was ice when she spoke. Ms. Thomas, do you understand that you've just confessed under oath to multiple counts of fraud, perjury, and conspiracy? I understand that I finally told the truth, Lily said. The truth that nobody wanted to hear. That sometimes the perfect sister, the successful one, the one everyone loves, deserves to know what it feels like to fall. Judge Morrison looked at Catherine Brennan. I'm going to assume your client needs psychological evaluation. I'm also going to— I'm not crazy, Lily interrupted. I'm just done pretending. Done being quiet. Done watching Allison win while I lose. She stood up despite not being dismissed, and for a moment, I thought she was going to walk out. But instead, she pulled something from her purse, a USB drive, and held it up. But I'm not finished yet. Your Honor, I'd like to submit one more piece of evidence, because I need Allison to understand that I didn't just hurt her reputation. I hurt her where it really matters. And I saw in her eyes that whatever was on that drive was the real attack. Everything before had been preparation. This was what she'd been building toward. The judge didn't allow Lily to submit the USB drive. After her courtroom confession, Catherine Brennan had finally found her voice and insisted on ending testimony immediately. Judge Morrison agreed, ordering a continuance while she decided on next steps given Lily's admission of fraud. But Lily left the courtroom with that same unsettling smile clutching her purse, with the drive still inside, and I knew whatever was on it wouldn't stay hidden for long. I was right. 48 hours later, my phone started exploding with notifications at 6 a.m. Text messages, emails, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Rachel was the first one I answered. Allison, don't go online. Just don't. I'm coming over. But of course I went online. How could I not? And there it was trending on every social media platform, shared thousands of times in the hours since it had appeared, a video of my dead husband confessing to affairs. I watched it with shaking hands sitting at my kitchen table while Jackson played with blocks in the living room, oblivious to the way our lives were being destroyed again. The video showed David in his home office, the one I was sitting 20 feet away from. He was in his favorite chair wearing the gray sweater I'd bought him for Christmas 3 years ago. His favorite coffee mug sat on the desk beside him. Behind him was the bookshelf with its distinctive arrangement of technical manuals and the family photo from our wedding. "I need to say this," video David said, and his voice broke in exactly the way David's voice used to break when he was emotional. "I need to be honest about what I've done. I've had affairs. Multiple affairs. And one of them was with Lily Allison's sister. I know how terrible that sounds. I know what it makes me. But I was lonely. And I made choices I can't take back." He went on describing guilt and shame, and how he'd never meant to hurt anyone. The video was 2 minutes long, and every second of it looked and sounded real. The lighting was right. The background was accurate. Even the way he rubbed his left temple when he was stressed, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache, was there. I watched it 3 times each viewing, making me feel more unmoored from reality. Could this be real? Could David have recorded this confession before his death? Hidden it somewhere, and somehow Lily found it. But the David I knew would never have made this video. He would have talked to me face to face. He would have fought to save our marriage, not created evidence of betrayal for posthumous discovery. By noon, the video had millions of views. News outlets were running stories. New evidence suggests widow's husband did have affairs. Mental health experts appeared on television analyzing David's body language and tone, discussing the psychology of guilt and confession. Comment sections exploded with people dissecting my marriage, my failures as a wife, what I must have done wrong to drive my husband to cheat. The narrative had shifted again. Yes, Lily had lied about her specific claim. Yes, she'd admitted to fraud. But look, here was David himself confessing to affairs. Maybe Lily's methods were wrong, but perhaps her underlying accusations weren't entirely fabricated. Maybe Allison really was the cold career woman who'd neglected her husband. I was drowning in it, unable to breathe, when Michael Chen called. "Don't respond to anyone. Don't comment on the video. I'm bringing someone to your house in 1 hour. A digital forensics expert. There's something wrong with that video." Dr. Sarah Chen arrived with a laptop and an intensity that reminded me of a surgeon preparing for a critical operation. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with short black hair and the kind of focused expression that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense. "Show me the video," she said without preamble. I pulled it up on my computer and she watched it once through without comment. Then she opened software I didn't recognize and began analyzing the video frame by frame. 20 minutes passed in silence, except for her occasional hums of interest. Finally, she sat back. "It's a deep fake. Sophisticated, but definitely artificial. How can you tell? Multiple indicators. The lighting on his face doesn't match the ambient light in the room. See here." She pointed to a frozen frame. "The shadow angle is wrong by about 15 degrees, and the lip sync is off by milliseconds. Most people won't notice, but it's there. Watch his mouth when he says affairs versus the audio. There's a tiny lag." She showed me more unnatural eye movements, compression artifacts consistent with AI-generated content inconsistencies, in the way the video degraded that suggested digital manipulation rather than organic recording. This was created using deepfake software. Someone took existing footage or images of your husband, trained an AI model on his face and voice, and generated this fake confession. The technology is good, but it's not perfect. An expert can always tell. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by rage. Lily did this. She threatened it in court with that USB drive. "Probably," Dr. Chen agreed. "But proving she created it will be challenging. Deepfake creation requires technical knowledge or money to hire someone who has it. We'll need to trace the video's origin, find evidence of transactions or communications." Michael Chen leaned forward. "But distributing a deepfake for the purpose of fraud and defamation is a federal crime." If we can prove Lily was involved in creating or distributing this, she's facing serious criminal charges. Not just civil penalties for estate fraud, but actual prison time. I looked at the frozen image of my husband's face, artificially generated, weaponized against us. Lily had destroyed my reputation, turned my family against me, contaminated my memories of David, and now she'd literally fabricated evidence of betrayal. She'd gone beyond civil litigation into criminal territory. She made a mistake, I said quietly. She got desperate after her courtroom confession and did something illegal. Yes, Michael agreed. The question is whether we can prove it before the damage becomes permanent. The deepfake destroyed what little professional reputation I had left. By Monday morning, my boss called me into his office and suggested I take extended leave to deal with my personal situation. The words were careful, legally vetted, but the meaning was clear. I was being pushed out. Clients didn't want to work with someone at the center of such a public scandal. Team members were uncomfortable. The company's reputation was being affected by association. I cleaned out my desk while former colleagues avoided eye contact. 5 years of work of late nights and successful campaigns and relationships I'd thought were genuine, reduced to a cardboard box of personal items and a severance package. At Jackson's daycare, parents who used to chat with me during pickup now found urgent reasons to leave quickly. One mother who'd invited me to her daughter's birthday party 2 months ago actually crossed the street when she saw me coming. The daycare director pulled me aside with practiced sympathy and suggested that perhaps Jackson would be more comfortable in a smaller, more private setting. Some of the other families have expressed concerns about the media attention, she said delicately. We both knew what she meant. They didn't want their children associated with mine. My mother's phone call came on Wednesday evening. I'd been avoiding her, but she left enough messages that I finally answered. Allison, I don't know what to believe anymore. Her voice was tired, defeated. That video looks real. Lily swears she didn't make it, that someone sent it to her anonymously. And I can't take this anymore. Maybe you should leave Seattle. Start over somewhere else. Give everyone time to forget. Mom, the video is fake. It's been verified by experts. Lily created it. But how can you be sure? I mean, David's right there in his office saying these things, and Lily says... I hung up. I couldn't listen to my own mother defending my sister's lies over my truth. The isolation was complete. No job, no supportive family, no community. Even Rachel, loyal Rachel, was starting to show strain. I believe you, she'd said last time we spoke. But this is just so much, Allison. Maybe you need more help than I can give. I sat in my empty house after putting Jackson to bed, staring at the walls that felt like they were closing in, wondering if my mother was right. Maybe I should just leave. Sell everything, move across the country, start over where nobody knew my name or my story. Let Lily have her hollow victory if it meant I could breathe again. That's when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Not a text, but something that said encrypted message and required me to download an app I'd never heard of. My first instinct was to delete it, but something made me click through. The message contained no words, just attachments. Screenshots of text conversations between Lily and someone labeled K. Brennan in her contacts. I recognized Catherine Brennan's number from court documents. The video is ready, cost more than expected, but worth it. When should we release it? After the DNA results, after I've admitted the Marcus thing. They'll think that's my final play. Then we hit them with this. You're sure it can't be traced to you? The guy I hired is on the dark web. Bitcoin transaction. No trail. And I'll just say, I received it anonymously, that I'm as shocked as everyone else. The messages were dated 3 weeks before the video appeared. Before Lily's courtroom confession. She'd planned this all along, the confession and the deepfake, both a 1-2 punch designed to destroy me completely. There were more screenshots. Financial records showing a cryptocurrency transaction for $20,000 to an account associated with video production services. Communications with someone using the handle Deep Creator discussing making it authentic and matching the environment perfectly. At the bottom was a single line of text, Gathering evidence. Stay strong. D. Daniel. My brother who'd sat silently through that family meeting, who'd avoided my eyes, who I'd thought had abandoned me like everyone else. My phone rang immediately, the same unknown number. I answered, heart pounding. Allison, it's me. Don't say my name out loud. If you're at home, go to a room away from windows. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the fan for white noise. Daniel. I'm sorry. His voice was tight, strained. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner, couldn't support you openly. But I needed Lily to trust me. I needed access. Access to what? Everything. Her phone, her computer, her conversations with Catherine Brennan. I've been pretending to support her, going to family meetings, acting like I thought you should just settle. It made me sick, but it was the only way. He took a breath. Mom and Lily both thought I was on their side. Lily got comfortable. She started showing me things, texting me updates, treating me like a co-conspirator. And I documented everything. I slid down to sit on the bathroom floor, processing this. Why? Because I know what it's like. His voice cracked slightly. Being invisible in this family, having Lily's drama suck up all the oxygen, watching her manipulate everyone and get away with it because she's the sensitive one who needs protection. You and I, we were just supposed to be strong, supposed to manage, supposed to not need anything. I thought about Daniel at family gatherings, always on the periphery. His achievements mentioned briefly before conversation pivoted back to Lily's latest crisis. My older brother, who'd become so good at being invisible, I'd stopped seeing him too. I couldn't stop her from attacking you, he continued. But I could gather evidence. I hired my own attorney to review everything. I kept copies of her communications. When she mentioned the deepfake plan to Catherine Brennan, I found a way to access those texts. He paused. I've been waiting for the right moment. Now we have enough. Enough for what? To prove she committed federal crimes. To show premeditation, conspiracy, wire fraud. The evidence I'm sending you proves she planned and paid for that video. Combined with the forensic analysis showing it's fake, we can destroy her credibility completely and possibly get her criminally prosecuted. Hope, dangerous and unfamiliar, sparked in my chest. Can you testify to this? Yes, but first we need to prove the video is fake in a way the public will believe. Expert testimony in court won't matter if people have already decided you're lying. We need to expose this where everyone can see it. Dr. Chen spent 3 days in my home office transforming it into a makeshift forensics laboratory. She brought equipment I didn't understand, monitors and hard drives and cables, connecting everything in a configuration that looked like something from a spy movie. Daniel stopped by twice, always careful to park a block away and enter through the back door, maintaining his cover as Lily's supporter. The problem isn't proving it's fake, Dr. Chen said on the second day, pulling up comparison videos on her screen. I can prove that definitively. The problem is making people understand the proof. Deepfake technology is complex. When I explain compression artifacts and frame interpolation inconsistencies, people's eyes glaze over. We need to make this visual, visceral, impossible to dismiss. She worked methodically, creating a presentation that would translate technical analysis into something anyone could understand. Side-by-side comparisons of the deepfake David next to real videos from our home movies. In the real videos, David's left eyebrow raised slightly. When he was being sincere, a micro-expression I'd noticed 1,000 times. In the deepfake, that eyebrow stayed flat. She circled it with a bright red arrow, wrote, "Missing characteristic expression" beneath it. She showed how the lighting on David's face in the fake video came from a slightly wrong angle, creating shadows that didn't match the lamp visible in the background. She demonstrated how when fake David said, "affairs," his lips formed the F sound a fraction of a second after the audio, a timing error so small most people wouldn't consciously notice, but their brains would register as wrong. Human brains are excellent at detecting when something is off about human faces, she explained. That's why deepfakes trigger an uncanny valley response in some viewers. They know something's wrong but can't articulate what. My job is to articulate it for them. The digital fingerprint analysis was damning. Dr. Chen traced the video's metadata, showing it had been created using specialized deepfake software not recorded by any camera. The compression patterns were consistent with AI generation, not organic recording. She even identified the likely source footage used to train the AI model, photos from David's company website and a video from a work presentation he'd given 2 years ago. Whoever created this was skilled, she admitted. They chose good source material, paid attention to environment details, spent time making it convincing. But no deepfake is perfect. There are always tells for someone who knows what to look for. While we worked to build our case, Lily was building hers in the court of public opinion. She gave an interview to a local news station that went viral, reaching millions of viewers within days. The interviewer was sympathetic, asking softball questions that let Lily perform her carefully constructed narrative. "I know people are confused," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I'm confused too. That video shows David was clearly struggling with something. Maybe it wasn't specifically about me. Maybe there were other affairs, other complications in his marriage. I think both Allison and I were victims of a troubled man who couldn't face his own demons." The narrative pivot was brilliant. She wasn't claiming to be his only affair anymore, just one of many casualties of his supposed character flaws. It made her seem more reasonable, more trustworthy, like someone revising their understanding in light of new evidence, rather than someone caught in an elaborate lie. "And his death," the interviewer prompted gently. "Do you think—" "I don't want to speculate," Lily interrupted, which was of course exactly what she was about to do. "But David died in a car accident, single-vehicle collision. He'd been under a lot of stress according to the video. Who knows what was going through his mind that night? We'll never know. And I think Allison deserves answers about what her husband was really dealing with." She was planting seeds of doubt about David's death, suggesting it might have been intentional, implying that his guilt over supposed affairs had driven him to suicide. It was vicious, calculating, and completely unprovable either way. But it worked. Comment sections filled with speculation. News articles began referring to David's controversial death and unanswered questions. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting statements which Michael Chen told me to ignore. "Don't feed the cycle. Let her talk. Every interview, every claim, everything she says is being documented. When we prove the video is fake, all of this will work against her." But the isolation deepened. Rachel stopped returning my calls. My mother told me she needed space to process everything. Even strangers on the street sometimes recognized me, gave me pitying looks or disgusted glares depending on which narrative they'd bought into. Then, a week after the deepfake's release, Lily gave another interview. This one was with a podcast that specialized in true crime and family drama, and they'd promoted it heavily on social media. Daniel sent me the link before it went public. "Watch this," his text said. "She's going nuclear." I listened while Jackson napped my stomach, nodding with dread. The interviewer asked Lily about why she thought Allison had always been so favored by the family, and Lily's response was delivered with perfect, calculated emotion. "There's something Allison doesn't know. Something our family has hidden for 25 years. When we were children, there was a terrible car accident. Our father was critically injured." She paused, let the silence build. "The doctors said they only had resources to save one person. One. And our mother had to choose between her husband and her older daughter. My blood went cold. She chose Allison. Our father died so Allison could live, and I saw it. I heard it. I've known since I was 8 years old that my father's death was because my sister's life was valued more than his." I listened to the podcast interview 3 times, each replay making me feel more unmoored from reality. A car accident when I was 10. My father dying. A choice between his life and mine. And I remembered none of it. That terrified me more than anything else Lily had done. She'd been building her entire vendetta on an event I had no memory of, a tragedy I'd apparently survived by being unconscious through the worst of it. How badly had I been injured? Why had no one ever told me the full story? And most importantly, was any of what Lily said actually true? I called Daniel immediately. "Did you know about this? About the accident?" "I was 6, he said quietly. "I remember Dad's funeral, but nothing before that. Mom never talked about how he died, just that it was an accident. I assumed it was straightforward, not—" He stopped. "You really don't remember—" "Nothing. I have vague memories of Dad, but the accident itself is blank." My hands were shaking. "I need to talk to Mom. Now." "Be careful. If Lily's telling the truth about what happened, Mom's been carrying this for 25 years. It's going to be painful for both of you." I drove to my mother's house with Jackson in the back seat, my mind racing through fragments of childhood memories trying to find anything about that day. But there was nothing. Just a gap where the trauma should have been my brain protecting me by erasing what it couldn't process. My mother answered the door, looking older than I'd ever seen her. The podcast had reached her too clearly. She'd been crying. "Allison, Is it true?" I asked, walking past her into the living room. "Was there an accident? Did you choose between Dad and me?" She sank onto the couch, and the way she moved, defeated and heavy, told me the answer before she spoke. "Yes, there was an accident. A truck ran a red light. Your father was driving. You were in the passenger seat. Lily and Daniel were in the back." I sat down across from her, Jackson playing with a toy truck at my feet, oblivious to the conversation reshaping his mother's understanding of her entire life. "What happened? You were both badly hurt, your father most of all. The ambulance got you to the hospital. The doctors said—" Her voice broke. "They said with our insurance, with the available resources that night, they could provide full treatment to one critical patient. One. I had to choose. The room felt too small, airless. And you chose me. I chose my daughter. I chose the child." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. What mother wouldn't? "Your father was my husband, my love, but you were 10 years old. You had your whole life ahead of you. I thought any parent would make the same choice. And I thought about Jackson, about the impossible mathematics of loving someone so much you'd sacrifice anything for them." Did Lily really overhear this? She was 8. She shouldn't have understood. The doctors were talking in the hallway, keeping their voices low, but Lily had wandered out of the waiting room. She heard parts of the conversation, misunderstood parts, and My mother's face crumpled. I never corrected her misunderstanding because I didn't know she'd heard anything. She never asked. She never said anything. I thought the girls were too young to remember the details. I thought I was protecting you both by not talking about that night. 25 years of silence. 25 years of Lily carrying a burden of knowledge, twisting it into hatred, using it to justify everything she'd done to me. And I'd had no idea. "She believes you valued my life over Dad's," I said slowly. "That's why she's spent decades trying to tear me down. She thinks I stole Dad from her." "That's not what happened." My mother's voice was fierce suddenly. "I didn't choose between your father and you. I chose my child over my spouse because that's what parents do. Your father would have made the same choice. He would have insisted on it." The certainty in her voice made me look up. "How do you know?" "Because—" She stopped and I saw something flicker across her face. A decision being made. "There's something Lily doesn't know. Something I've never told anyone." My heart started pounding. "What?" "Before the doctors even asked me to choose, before I had to make that impossible decision, your father was still conscious. Barely, but conscious. And he told them who to save." The words hung in the air between us. Outside, I could hear birds singing, traffic passing, the ordinary sounds of an ordinary day. But inside this room, the foundation of everything Lily believed was about to crack. "He chose you, Allison. Your father chose you. He told the doctors to save his daughter, that you were young and had your whole life ahead, that you'd grow up to protect your younger siblings. He made the choice. Not me. Him." I couldn't breathe. "Why didn't you tell us?" Why didn't you tell Lily? Because I thought it would hurt more. I thought it would make Lily feel like her father didn't love her enough, didn't value her life. I thought... Her voice broke completely. I thought silence was kinder than the truth, but I was wrong. My silence let Lily build a story in her head that was worse than what really happened, and it's destroyed both my daughters. I sat there trying to process this. My father had chosen to save me. Not because he loved Lily less, but because he was a parent making an impossible decision about his children's futures. And Lily had spent 25 years hating me for a choice I hadn't made, that our mother hadn't made, but that our father had made out of love. I need to tell her, I said. She won't believe you. Not now. Not after everything. Maybe not. But suddenly I understood the full scope of the tragedy we'd all been living in. Lily wasn't just evil or manipulative. She was a child who'd misunderstood a trauma, and that misunderstanding had poisoned her entire life. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it in a way that was almost as painful as the original loss. My phone buzzed. Michael Chen. We have a court date. Judge wants to address the deepfake and the new allegations. 2 days from now. 2 days to decide how much truth to reveal and whether the truth would heal anything or just create new devastation. I needed more than what my mother had just told me. The bare facts weren't enough. I needed to understand exactly what had happened that night, the sequence of events, the words spoken, because somewhere in those details was the key to understanding 25 years of family dysfunction. Tell me everything, I said. Not the summary. Everything. What exactly did the doctor say? What exactly did you say? What did Dad say? My mother stood and walked to the window, her back to me, looking out at the garden my father had planted before he died. I'd never thought about that before, how she'd maintained those flower beds for 25 years, a living memorial to a man whose death had shaped all of our lives. The ER doctor came to find me in the waiting room. She began, her voice barely above a whisper. He said your father and you were both critical. He said in a perfect world with unlimited resources they could save you both. But it wasn't a perfect world. That night they were short-staffed, short on blood, short on the specialized equipment needed for the kind of trauma you both had. He said they could provide full life-saving care to one patient. One. And I had to decide who. She turned to face me, and I saw tears streaming down her cheeks. I chose your father, immediately, without hesitation. I said, save my husband. I begged them. I told them you were young and resilient, that children heal better, that you'd have a better chance of surviving with minimal intervention than an adult would. I was willing to risk losing you to save him. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother had chosen my father. Lily's entire narrative about me being the favored child, the chosen one, was built on a misunderstanding of what had actually happened. The doctors took me to see him, she continued. They'd stabilized him enough for a brief conversation. He was on a gurney in the hallway, hooked up to machines, bleeding internally. But he was conscious. And when they explained the situation to him, when they told him I'd chosen him, he refused. Her voice broke completely. He said no. He said, save Allison. He was so clear about it, Allison. So absolutely certain. He told the doctors, save my daughter. She's 10 years old. She'll grow up to protect her little sister and brother. My girls need their mother more than they need me. This is my choice, not my wife's. This is what I want. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process the image of my father dying in a hospital hallway, making the conscious decision to prioritize my life over his own. The selflessness of it, the absolute clarity of his choice was overwhelming. The doctors argued with him, my mother said. They told him he didn't have to make that decision, that it should be mine. But he was adamant. He said, I'm the father. It's my job to protect them. Let me do my job. Save my daughter. And then, she sobbed. Then he looked at me and said, take care of our babies. Tell them I love them. Tell Allison to be strong for Lily." Jackson had stopped playing and was watching his grandmother cry confusion on his little face. I picked him up, held him close, needing to feel his warmth, his reality, his life that continued despite all the death and tragedy that had come before. "Why didn't you tell us?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell Lily that Dad made the choice, not you?" "Because I thought it would hurt her more." My mother wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. She was 8 years old. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her father chose to die so her sister could live? I was terrified she'd think he didn't love her enough, that she'd feel rejected by his choice. I thought if I just never talked about the details, if we all moved forward without examining that night too closely, the girls would be okay. But Lily overheard something. She built her own version of what happened. She must have. And my silence let that version take root and grow and poison her. If I'd just been honest from the beginning, if I'd explained that your father made a choice out of love for all of us, maybe... She couldn't finish. "I made the wrong call, Allison. I thought secrets would protect my daughters. But secrets in families don't protect. They poison. They fester. They destroy. And look what my silence has cost us all." We sat in that terrible knowledge together. My father had died protecting me, asking me to protect Lily. And instead of that protection, we'd spent decades in conflict with Lily, hating me for a sacrifice I'd never asked for and never even known about. "I need to tell her," I said. "I need to tell Lily the truth. She won't believe you, not now. She's built her entire identity around being the less loved daughter, the overlooked one, the one who lost her father because you were valued more. The truth would destroy the foundation of everything she's told herself." Maybe. But didn't she deserve to know the truth anyway? Didn't we all deserve to stop living in the shadows of misunderstandings and silence? My phone sitting on the coffee table suddenly seemed very present. I'd forgotten it was there during this conversation, had forgotten everything except the story my mother was telling. But phones record. Phones capture. Phones preserve evidence. And later, much later, I would discover that someone had been listening to every word. The day after my conversation with my mother, Michael Chen called and asked me to come to his office immediately. "There's one more document David left," he said. "I've been holding it per his specific instructions. Those instructions said to only share it if you were facing a legal battle with family members. I think we're well past that threshold now." I arranged childcare for Jackson and drove to Michael's office with a sense of both dread and anticipation. Every revelation seemed to peel back another layer, expose another secret, complicate the already impossible tangle of truth and lies that my life had become. Michael had his conference room set up with a large monitor. On the screen was a frozen image of David sitting in his home office, the timestamp showing it had been recorded at 2 a.m, 3 months before his death. Just seeing his face alive and moving and real made my breath catch. "Are you ready?" Michael asked gently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He pressed play, and David came to life on the screen. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, but his expression was focused and determined. When he spoke, it was directly to the camera, directly to me. "Allison, my love, if you're watching this, it means my worst fears came true. Lily followed through with her plan, and I wasn't there to stop her. I'm so sorry." His voice was achingly familiar, and I found myself leaning forward as if I could somehow reach through the screen and touch him. 2 years ago, I overheard a phone conversation Lily was having. I was at your mother's house helping fix the back porch railing, and Lily was in the kitchen on her phone. She didn't know I could hear her. She was talking to someone about using a paternity claim to extract money from our family. At first I thought I'd misheard, but then she said your name said something about you finally losing something you cared about. David ran his hand through his hair, the gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "I hired a private investigator. I needed to know if this was just angry talk or an actual plan. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Lily had deliberately initiated a relationship with my brother Marcus during a visit to London. She'd gotten pregnant, and she was planning to claim I was the father, knowing that after I died, You wouldn't be able to ask me to deny it. My hands were shaking. He'd known. For 2 years he'd known and never told me. I didn't tell you because you were 7 months pregnant when I found out. You were dealing with complications, and I couldn't add this burden. Then Jackson was born, and you were exhausted and healing, and I thought I had time. I thought I could handle this quietly, build legal protections, neutralize the threat before you ever had to know about it. He looked down, then back at the camera. But I need to tell you something else. Something harder. I could have confronted Lily directly. I could have gone to your mother, exposed the whole thing, prevented this from ever happening. But I didn't. And I need you to understand why. I felt Michael's presence beside me, but my entire focus was on David's face, on the words I knew were coming. Allison, I've watched you for 8 years accommodate your family. I've watched you swallow hurts that would break most people. I've watched you choose peace over justice, silence over truth again and again. You diminish yourself for them. You make yourself smaller so they can feel bigger. And I've watched our son start to see that pattern, start to learn that's what love looks like. His eyes were intense, burning with emotion. I don't want Jackson to grow up thinking that being strong means being silent. I don't want him to learn that family loyalty means accepting abuse. And I realized that as long as I kept protecting you from your family's toxicity, you'd never learn to protect yourself. The words stung, but I couldn't look away. I know this sounds harsh. I know it sounds like I'm testing you, and maybe that's what I'm doing. But it's not a test to see if you're worthy of my love. It's an opportunity for you to discover what I already know, that you're strong enough to fight for yourself and for Jackson. That you don't need me or anyone else to be your shield. That you can be your own warrior. He leaned closer to the camera. The legal protections I've built into my will are designed to give you weapons. The evidence I've gathered gives you ammunition. But you have to be the one to use them. You have to be the one to stand up and say, enough. Because if I do it for you, you'll never believe you could have done it yourself. His expression softened. I'm sorry I won't be there to see you win this. I'm sorry I left you to face this alone. But I'm not sorry for believing in you enough to know you could. You're stronger than your family has ever given you credit for. Stronger than you give yourself credit for. And our son needs to see that strength. He needs a mother who knows her own power. David's hand reached toward the camera as if he could touch me across time. I love you, Allison. I've always loved you. And I believe in you. Fight for yourself. Fight for Jackson. Show them who you really are. The video ended. The screen went black. I sat there in the silence of Michael's conference room, tears streaming down my face, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions I couldn't begin to sort through. Gratitude that David had loved me enough to prepare all of this. Anger that he'd kept such enormous secrets. Understanding of his motivations even as I resented his methods. Hurt that he'd thought I needed to be pushed into a corner to find my strength. And underneath it all, a fierce determination to prove he'd been right to believe in me. Michael handed me a tissue. He was a complicated man, your husband. He was. I wiped my eyes, straightened my shoulders. But he was right about one thing. I have been letting my family treat me like I was less than I am. And Jackson's watching, learning, building his understanding of what strength looks like. I stood up, feeling something shift inside me. David had given me weapons. My mother had given me truth. Daniel had given me evidence. Dr. Chen had given me proof. And now it was time for me to stop being defensive and start being decisive. What's our next move? I asked Michael. He smiled. Now we go on the offensive. Michael Chen filed the motions on a Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon, the legal landscape had completely transformed. We weren't asking the court for mercy or understanding. We were demanding justice and accountability. The filing was over 100 pages long, meticulously documented, devastating in its scope. The first section dealt with the deepfake video. Dr. Chen's forensic analysis was presented in excruciating detail with visual aids that made the fraud obvious even to lay people. Side-by-side comparisons showing mismatched lighting, incorrect lip-sync timing, missing characteristic expressions. The digital fingerprint proving the video had been created using specialized AI software rather than recorded by any camera. Every technical detail translated into language a jury could understand. But we didn't stop at proving the video was fake. Daniel's evidence showed exactly how it had been created and who was responsible. Text messages between Lily and Catherine Brennan discussing the deepfake plan dated weeks before the video appeared. The video is ready, cost more than expected, but worth it. Financial records showing Lily had paid $20,000 in cryptocurrency to an account associated with video production services on the dark web. Communications with someone using the handle Deep Creator, negotiating details about making it authentic and matching the environment perfectly. The evidence didn't just prove Lily had lied. It proved she'd committed federal crimes: wire fraud, identity theft, defamation with malicious intent. The filing requested not just dismissal of her inheritance claim, but criminal prosecution. Simultaneously, we revealed David's preparations. His private investigator reports documenting Lily's research into paternity law 2 years before her claim. Audio recordings of Lily discussing how, if I can prove it's his kid, I'm set for life. David's will with its hidden clauses specifically designed to trap anyone making fraudulent claims. His notes showing he'd anticipated this exact scenario and built legal protections that would spring closed around Lily the moment she activated her plan. The legal filing reframed the entire narrative. Lily wasn't a struggling single mother seeking justice for her child. She was a calculating predator who'd spent years planning an elaborate fraud. She'd deliberately gotten pregnant by David's brother to create a biological connection to his family. She'd researched the law to find loopholes. She'd commissioned a deepfake video when her initial lies unraveled. Every sympathetic interview, every tearful statement, every accusation against me was revealed as part of a long-term conspiracy to commit estate fraud. The media response was immediate and dramatic. Outlets that had vilified me for months suddenly scrambled to cover the reversal. New evidence reveals elaborate fraud in estate case. Sister's paternity claim built on years of deception. Deepfake video part of calculated attack against widow. Some journalists who'd bought Lily's narrative wholesale now looked foolish for their lack of skepticism. A few tried to maintain that both sides had issues, or that the truth was complicated, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Others issued corrections and apologies. The podcast that had given Lily a platform to reveal the accident story now issued a statement saying they'd been manipulated by a sophisticated liar and were reviewing their fact-checking processes. Michael Chen advised me to make a single public statement carefully prepared that would define my position without giving Lily ammunition for further attacks. Rachel helped me write it. Daniel reviewed it for legal implications. And on Wednesday evening, I stood in front of cameras outside the courthouse and delivered the words I'd been waiting months to say. My sister Lily has spent the past 6 months destroying my reputation, my career, and my peace of mind. She's claimed my late husband fathered her child, which DNA evidence has proven false. She's commissioned a deepfake video to make it appear my husband confessed to crimes he never committed. She's weaponized family tragedy to justify criminal behavior. I paused, letting the words settle. Around me, reporters held microphones closer, cameras focused tighter. Lily has claimed her actions were motivated by losing our father in a childhood accident. That tragedy was real. The loss was devastating. I understand grief and pain better than she knows because I lost the same father at the same time. And 6 months ago, I lost my husband. I know what it means to be shaped by loss. My voice was steady now, stronger than I'd felt in months. But loss doesn't justify destruction. Pain doesn't excuse fraud. Tragedy is not a license to commit federal crimes. Lily made choices. She planned, executed, and maintained an elaborate deception designed to destroy me financially and emotionally. Those were her choices, and she needs to face the consequences of them. I looked directly into the main camera. I have sympathy for the child Lily was who witnessed trauma she couldn't process. But the adult she became chose to hurt others rather than heal herself. And that's on her, not on the family who loved her, not on the father who died, and certainly not on me. The statement went viral within hours. Unlike Lily's carefully cultivated victimhood, my words carried the weight of someone who'd been pushed to the edge and found strength there. Comment sections that had been hostile for months suddenly filled with support. Finally, she's fighting back. About time someone called out Lily's manipulation. This is what real strength looks like. On Friday, the King County Prosecutor's Office issued a statement. They were opening a criminal investigation into the deepfake video and related fraud. The statement noted that creating and distributing deepfake content with intent to defraud was a federal crime carrying penalties of up to 20 years in prison. I thought it was over. I thought we'd won. But that afternoon, Lily's attorney filed an emergency motion, and attached to it was something I never expected: a recording of my conversation with my mother, the one where she'd revealed the full truth about my father's choice in the accident. Lily had one final card to play, and she was about to use the truth itself as a weapon against me. The emergency motion revealed that Lily had recorded my conversation with my mother. Somehow she'd planted a recording device or hacked a phone or found some way to capture that intimate, painful discussion about our father's death. The audio file was attached to the motion, and Catherine Brennan's filing argued that it proved mitigating circumstances for Lily's behavior and demonstrated that the family dysfunction ran deeper than previously understood. Michael Chen called me immediately. She's using the recording as leverage. She wants a settlement negotiation. Today. We met in a neutral conference room at a downtown law office. Lily sat across from me with Catherine Brennan, and for the first time since this began, she looked desperate rather than confident. The federal criminal investigation had rattled her. The prosecutor's statement had made this real in a way civil litigation hadn't. Catherine Brennan opened the negotiation. My client is willing to withdraw all claims against the estate and issue a public apology regarding the false paternity allegations. In exchange, Mrs. Thomas agrees not to pursue criminal prosecution for the deepfake video. We can't control the prosecutor's office, Michael Chen replied calmly. They've opened their own investigation. But you could decline to cooperate. You could issue a statement saying you don't wish to see charges filed. Catherine glanced at Lily, who was staring at me with an intensity that was almost frightening. If you refuse, my client will release the full recording of the conversation with your mother. The public will hear that your mother chose you over your father, that you've lived a life bought with his death. It was meant to be a nuclear threat, the final weapon that would turn public sympathy back to Lily's side. A woman who'd suffered since childhood, watching her sister live a life that cost their father his, finally breaking under the weight of injustice. Lily believed the recording would vindicate everything she'd done. I looked at my sister across the table. She met my eyes, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just hatred, but desperation. She was cornered, facing federal charges, watching her entire plan collapse, and this was her last play. I agree, I said quietly. Michael Chen turned to me surprised. Allison, I agree to let Lily release the recording, but with one condition. I leaned forward. I get to share the complete story, not just the part Lily knows, the whole truth about what happened that night. Lily's expression flickered with confusion. Catherine Brennan frowned. What do you mean, the complete story? I mean that Lily recorded a conversation, but she doesn't know everything that was said. And if she releases that recording, I'll release the rest, the part she missed, the part that changes everything. Lily's confidence faltered. What are you talking about? Do we have a deal? I asked. You release what you have, I release what I know. Let the public decide who's telling the truth. Catherine Brennan whispered urgently to Lily. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw Lily's face harden with determination. She thought she knew what weapons she had. She thought the recording would destroy me. She had no idea it would destroy her justification instead. Fine, Lily said. Release everything. Let people see who you really are. We adjourned the settlement negotiation with nothing settled. But later that afternoon, Michael Chen received a call from the federal prosecutor's office. They wanted to meet with Lily and her attorney to discuss a plea agreement. The offer was straightforward: pled guilty to a reduced charge of reckless endangerment through distribution of false digital content. The deal would result in 3 years of probation rather than prison time. She'd have to publicly admit the deepfake video was fabricated, pay full restitution to me for legal costs incurred defending against her claims, and complete 500 hours of community service. Additionally, she'd have to cooperate with the investigation by revealing who she'd hired to create the video. The alternative was going to trial on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud an estate. If convicted, she faced up to 20 years in federal prison. Catherine Brennan called Michael that evening. She has 48 hours to decide, but I'm recommending she take it. A trial would destroy her. And the recording? Michael asked. She still plans to release it. She thinks it will help her case show mitigating circumstances, generate sympathy. Catherine's voice was troubled. I've advised against it, but she's insistent. She believes the truth about your father's death will vindicate her actions. That night, I sat with Daniel in my kitchen after Jackson was asleep. He'd been my secret ally through everything, and now he was the only family member I could trust. Are you ready for this? He asked. When the truth comes out about Dad, it's going to devastate Lily. Everything she's believed for 25 years, everything she's built her identity around, it's all going to collapse. I know. I looked at my brother. But she needs to know. We all needed to know years ago. Mom's silence poisoned us all. The plea deal, Daniel said carefully. If Lily takes it, she avoids prison. She gets probation. Some people will say she got off too easy. Some people will say that regardless. I thought about David's video, his belief that I needed to fight for myself. But this was never about revenge. It was about truth, about stopping the cycle of secrets and lies that's defined our family for decades. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Recording will be released tomorrow morning. Are you ready? I didn't know who'd sent it. Maybe Lily, maybe Catherine Brennan, maybe a journalist who'd gotten wind of what was coming. I typed back, yes, because tomorrow the full truth about our father's choice would finally be revealed. And Lily would discover that the foundation of her 25 years of hatred had been built on a misunderstanding. That she'd hated the wrong person for the wrong reason and destroyed both our lives in service of a lie she'd told herself. The truth was about to come out, and it would shatter everything Lily thought she knew. The courtroom was packed when Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. Lily had made good on her threat, releasing the recording to media outlets that morning. Headlines screamed about the impossible choice and family secret revealed. But what the media didn't know was that they only had half the story. Michael Chen stood. Your Honor, the defense has made the circumstances of the Thomas family's childhood tragedy relevant to these proceedings. We request permission to present complete testimony on this matter. Judge Morrison nodded. Call your witness. My mother walked to the stand looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, diminished by the weight of 25 years of silence. She was sworn in, sat down, and looked directly at Lily, then at me, then at her hands folded in her lap. Michael Chen's questions were gentle, walking her through the night of the accident step by step. The truck running the red light, the ambulance ride, the ER doctor explaining the terrible reality of limited resources. My mother's voice shook as she recounted details she'd buried for decades. What did the doctor tell you? Michael asked. He said they could provide full life-saving care to one critical patient, my husband or my daughter. I had to choose. The courtroom was silent except for her voice. I chose my husband. I begged them to save him. I told them Allison was young, that children heal better, that she'd survive with basic care. I chose him. I heard Lily gasp. This wasn't what she'd believed. This wasn't the story she'd been carrying. What happened next? Michael prompted gently. They took me to see Robert. He was conscious barely. They explained what I'd decided. And he refused. My mother's voice broke. He said no, save Allison. She's 10 years old. She'll grow up to protect her little sister and brother. My girls need their mother more than they need me." My mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He made them promise. He said, 'This is my choice, not my wife's. Save my daughter. Tell Allison to be strong for Lily.'" Those were his last coherent words. He chose to die so Allison could live to protect her siblings. I watched Lily's face crumble. The realization was hitting her in real time, destroying the foundation of everything she'd built her identity around. Her father hadn't loved her less. He'd loved her so much he'd made the ultimate sacrifice, asking his older daughter to protect her. Lily stood up suddenly, knocking her chair backward. Catherine Brennan reached for her, but Lily pulled away. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, that's not. I heard—" "You heard part of a conversation," my mother said, looking at her youngest daughter with infinite sadness. "You heard the doctors talking about a choice. But you didn't hear your father make it. You didn't hear him ask Allison to protect you. You built a story from fragments, and I let you because I was too afraid to tell you the truth." Lily collapsed back into her chair, her hands covering her face. Through her fingers I heard her sobbing. 25 years. I hated her for 25 years. I thought she took him from me. I thought— She couldn't finish. Judge Morrison called a recess, but Lily couldn't move. She sat there crying while the courtroom slowly emptied. I stood to leave to give her privacy in her devastation, but I caught her eye across the room. "He wanted me to protect you," I said quietly. "And I failed him. I'm sorry." Lily's face contorted with fresh anguish. "You failed him. I destroyed everything he wanted. He sacrificed himself so you could take care of me, and I spent decades trying to destroy you. I hated you for a choice you didn't make. She broke down completely. Catherine Brennan approached Michael and me in the hallway. "The plea deal," she said. "Lily's ready to take it. She'll plead guilty, pay restitution, accept probation. She just wants this to end." I nodded, feeling not triumph, but exhausted sadness. This was how it ended. Not with victory, but with the ruins of what could have been if someone had just told the truth 25 years ago. The formal plea hearing took place 2 weeks later. Lily stood before Judge Morrison looking nothing like the confident woman who'd walked into my son's birthday party 7 months ago. She was thin, pale, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. When asked how she pleaded to the charge of reckless endangerment through distribution of false digital content, her voice was barely audible. "Guilty, Your Honor." Judge Morrison's expression was stern. "Ms. Thomas, do you understand that you commissioned a deepfake video with the intent to damage your sister's reputation and manipulate legal proceedings?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you understand that regardless of your personal pain or family history, these actions constituted crimes?" Lily's voice broke. "Yes, Your Honor, I understand. Nothing justifies what I did." The sentencing was swift. 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, $150,000 in restitution to me for legal costs, and a restraining order prohibiting Lily from contacting me or Jackson for 10 years, except through attorneys regarding matters related to her own son. Marcus arrived from London 3 days after the hearing. David's younger brother, who'd had no idea he'd fathered a child during what he'd thought was a brief, meaningless connection with his brother's sister-in-law. He was devastated by the deception, angry at having been used, but determined to be present for his son. The custody hearing was anticlimactic. Lily's attorney argued for her to retain primary custody, citing the bond between mother and child. But the judge reviewed Lily's criminal conviction, her financial instability now that she owed me substantial restitution, and her demonstrated pattern of deception and manipulation. Marcus was awarded primary custody. Lily would have supervised visitation every other weekend. I watched Lily leave the courthouse that day alone, and felt something I hadn't expected: pity. She'd destroyed her own life trying to destroy mine. She'd lost her son's daily presence, lost her family's support, lost whatever future she might have built if she'd chosen healing over hatred. My mother called me a week later and asked to meet. We sat in the same coffee shop where Lily and I had our confrontation months ago, but this time the conversation was different. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words carried the weight of 25 years. "I thought keeping quiet would protect you girls, but silence didn't protect anyone. It poisoned all of us. I prioritized avoiding difficult conversations over actually healing trauma, and look what it cost." Some family members apologized quietly. Aunt Carol sent flowers with a note. "I should have questioned more and judged less." Uncle Frank called to say he'd been wrong. But most simply faded away, embarrassed by their poor judgment, unable to face their complicity in Lily's campaign. Only Daniel remained. My brother and I grew closer in the aftermath, meeting for coffee weekly, building a relationship we'd never really had. One afternoon, he said something that stuck with me. "We all handled the same family dysfunction differently. I was angry for years, but I directed it inward and became invisible. You directed it into achievement and became a target. Lily directed it outward and became a villain. Same trauma, 3 different responses, all of them damaging in their own way." He was right. We'd all been shaped by a family that prioritized appearances over authenticity, silence over truth, keeping peace over addressing problems. Lily had responded with destruction. I'd responded with accommodation. Daniel had responded with withdrawal. None of us had been whole. I threw myself into rebuilding. New job at a different company. New therapist to help Jackson and me process the trauma. New boundaries with family members who remained in my life. I was learning slowly to choose myself without guilt. A year passed. Jackson turned 2. Life found a rhythm. And then one afternoon, a letter arrived from Lily. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. It had been forwarded through attorneys. Lily's handwriting on the envelope still achingly familiar despite everything. Jackson, now 2 years old, played with blocks nearby as I finally slid it open. "I understand now," it read. "I understand what I did. I understand what Father wanted. I'm trying to be better." That was all. No apology, no request for forgiveness, just acknowledgement. I read it once, then walked to the fireplace and dropped it in. Not from hatred, but because I didn't need it. I'd spent a year building a life that didn't require Lily's validation or repentance. Her journey toward becoming better was hers to walk. Mine was separate. We'd moved to Portland 6 months ago. A fresh start where I wasn't defined by scandal, where Jackson could grow up without the weight of family drama. I'd accepted a position at a marketing firm that valued what I could do, rather than being distracted by what had been done to me. My professional reputation had been restored by people who actually knew me, colleagues who'd vouched for my character when the truth emerged. I joined a support group for single mothers, and occasionally I spoke at events about surviving family betrayal. Not for revenge or attention, but because I knew others faced similar situations. Toxic families, siblings who weaponized trauma. The impossible choice between maintaining peace and maintaining self-worth. If my story could help someone else recognize they weren't alone, that was worth the vulnerability of sharing it. On a Saturday afternoon in early fall, I took Jackson to the park. He was at that beautiful, frustrating stage of learning to walk. He'd pull himself up on a bench, take 3 wobbly steps, and fall onto his padded bottom. Then he'd laugh that pure, joyful sound of childhood resilience and pull himself up to try again. I watched him fall and rise with determined joy and thought about resilience. How falling is inevitable. How staying down is a choice. Jackson didn't know that yet, didn't know he had a choice. He just knew he wanted to walk, so he kept trying. My father had made a choice. He'd chosen my life over his own, asking me to protect my sister. For years I'd thought protection meant accommodating Lily's pain, absorbing her anger, keeping peace at any cost. But I understood now that wasn't what my father meant. Sometimes protection means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means stopping someone from hurting themselves and others through their own destructive choices. Love without boundaries doesn't protect, it enables. I thought about David's final video, his belief that I needed to discover my own strength. He'd been right. I'd spent my life making myself smaller to fit into spaces my family designated for me. But I was done shrinking, done accepting less than I deserved, done teaching my son through example that family loyalty meant tolerating abuse. Jackson stumbled toward me, arms outstretched, and I caught him as he fell into my embrace. He laughed, delighted by his own courage. I held him close and made a silent promise. You'll grow up knowing that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That family can be chosen as well as given. That your worth isn't determined by anyone's inability to see it. You'll never question whether you matter, because I will never again pretend that my peace is more important than my truth. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jackson pointed at it, babbling his toddler observations, and I smiled. This was what mattered. Not the family that had failed me, not the sister who'd tried to destroy me, not the past that had shaped me. This moment, this child, this future we were building together brick by brick, choice by choice. I stood up, lifting Jackson onto my hip. Behind us was everything that had happened. Ahead of us was everything we'd become. And for the first time in my life, I was walking toward the future without the weight of other people's expectations on my shoulders. The cycle was broken. A new generation would learn different lessons. And that was the greatest gift I could give my father's memory, using the life he'd chosen for me to build something better than what came before. We walked home through the fading light, leaving the park and the past behind, moving toward a future that was finally completely ours. And that's where Allison's story ends, or perhaps more accurately, where her new story truly begins. When we started this journey together at Jackson's first birthday party, Allison was a woman who'd spent her entire life making herself smaller, swallowing hurt, choosing silence over truth because she believed that's what family loyalty required. She was drowning in grief from losing her husband, and she had no idea that her own sister had been plotting for years to destroy what little she had left. But look at where she ended up. Not broken, not bitter, not defeated. She rebuilt her life on her own terms, set boundaries that protected herself and her son, and broke a generational cycle of dysfunction that had poisoned her family for decades. She discovered that strength doesn't mean enduring abuse quietly. It means standing up and saying enough, even when that stand cost you relationships you thought you couldn't live without. Now I know some of you might be thinking about forgiveness right now. You might be wondering if Allison should have forgiven Lily, if she was too harsh by burning that letter, if family should get more chances. And here's what I want you to understand, what this story is really about at its core. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. You can forgive someone for your own peace without ever allowing them back into your life. You can understand why someone hurt you without accepting their behavior. And most importantly, you can choose yourself without being the villain. Allison's father sacrificed his life with a specific purpose, asking her to protect her younger sister. But protection doesn't mean enabling destructive behavior. It doesn't mean absorbing someone else's pain until it destroys you too. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is set a boundary and let them face the consequences of their choices. That's what Allison finally learned. That's what broke the cycle. Think about the lessons we've witnessed in this story. We saw how family secrets kept with good intentions can poison multiple generations. Allison's mother thought silence would protect her daughters from trauma, but that silence created a vacuum that Lily filled with misunderstanding and hatred. We learned that unaddressed grief doesn't disappear. It transforms into something else, something dangerous, something that can consume decades of life if we let it. We also saw how toxic family dynamics teach us to betray ourselves. Allison, Daniel, and Lily all responded differently to the same dysfunction, but all three responses were damaging. Allison accommodated until she lost herself. Daniel withdrew until he became invisible. Lily attacked until she destroyed her own life. 3 siblings, 3 different survival strategies, all of them rooted in a family system that valued appearance over authenticity. But here's the most important lesson, the one I want you to carry with you long after this story ends. The most important relationship you have is with yourself. When you betray your own worth to keep peace with others, you teach your children to do the same. When you accept treatment you don't deserve because they're family, you're modeling for the next generation that family gets unlimited passes to cause harm. Allison broke that pattern. She showed Jackson through her actions that being kind doesn't mean being weak, that setting boundaries is an act of love, and that your worth is not determined by anyone's inability to see it. David knew this. That's why he built those legal protections, but left Allison to fight her own battle. He wasn't testing her cruelty. He was giving her the opportunity to discover strength she didn't know she had. And she rose to that challenge. She didn't do it perfectly. She stumbled, doubted herself, felt isolated and afraid. But she kept moving forward, kept fighting, kept choosing truth over peace. And in the end, she didn't just win a legal battle. She won her freedom. Now, if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like Allison trapped between loyalty to family and loyalty to yourself, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and honoring your own boundaries? What did you choose? What did it cost you? What did you learn? Your story matters. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage. And if you found value in Allison's journey, if you believe these lessons about boundaries, authenticity, and breaking generational cycles need to be heard by more people, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose themselves. That family doesn't get to demand unlimited sacrifice, that healing sometimes means walking away. I read every single comment. I see you. I hear you. And I'm creating these stories because I know so many of you are fighting battles similar to Allison's. You're dealing with family members who weaponize your love. You're torn between loyalty and self-preservation. You're wondering if you're the villain for finally saying no. And I want you to know you're not the villain. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. Protecting yourself doesn't make you heartless. And choosing your own well-being over someone else's dysfunction doesn't make you wrong. Allison walked away from her past toward a future she's building brick by brick, choice by choice. You can too. The cycle can be broken. The pattern can change. And it starts with one person brave enough to say, I deserve better than this. That person can be you. Thank you for joining me on Allison's journey. Until the next story, remember, your worth is not negotiable, your boundaries are not optional, and your peace is not a prize someone else gets to steal. Take care of yourselves.